Hey friends, it's Mike. I have received a number of requests from folks for a combined Part 1 and Part 2 video of Steve Fawber's research into biological Paul's final resting place. Thanks for watching. Welcome, my friends, to the Sage of Quay Radio Hour, your home for free and critical thinking, and I'm your host, Mike Williams. Today, my very special guest is fellow Paul is Dead researcher Steve Fawber. Steve has been looking into where biological Paul might be buried, and his research has presented a very interesting theory. And without further ado, here's Steve. Well, folks, I have the show today that I have been promising for quite a while, and Steve Fawber is with us. Steve is a Paul is Dead researcher, and he has spent a lot of time looking into the McCartney and Beatles conspiracy. And today's show is going to be about where biological Paul McCartney, where he may be buried. And Steve, welcome to the show. But before we get started, I was wondering if you could just fill the audience in on your journey in the whole Paul is Dead McCartney conspiracy arena. How did you get there? When did you start looking at it? Why is it of interest to you?
Hi, Mike. I started watching YouTube videos primarily on Paul is Dead. Things just kept popping up on the YouTube about it, and I watched a bunch of things. I finally came to your site, that you had going, and I found yours to be the most definitive. And the more I got into it, I saw you mentioning about memoirs of Billy Shears, and I read the book. It's 666 pages, which is also a bit creepy. I thought. But I couldn't put the book down. It was so informative, and you could tell that, it was written by Thomas U. Harriet, but you could tell it's Billy Shepard, or whatever his real name is, was actually co-writing that, I believe. And I found it fascinating because I grew up with the Beatles. I don't know if I was 6 years old. I think I was 6 years old when they came on the Ed Sullivan Show, and I was always fascinated with the Beatles. They were an instant sensation. And I grew up with them. Every time an album came out, I'd go buy an album, even display it in pictures. I remember Sgt. Pepper, I had it opened up in front of my fireplace, and my family took a picture of me. Just very into the Beatles growing up. I still like them a lot.
I was the same way, and I've mentioned this on a lot of shows. I was a huge Beatle freak, huge. And, at the age of 9, I was begging my father to take me to go see Yellow Submarine, and I know we'll talk about Yellow Submarine later on in the presentation. So they were a big, big influence in my life. Now, when you were reading memoirs, did you have a reaction? Did you feel yourself getting angry, upset, or was it okay?
Yeah, at first I was very angry at Billy, and then I started thinking it's much deeper than him. He was being posed almost as a puppet, I believe. And I started having more compassion for Billy the more I read it. I had to realize myself that Bill was actually probably my favorite Beatle, and it wasn't really Paul McCartney. I love songs like Yesterday. If Paul actually wrote it, I don't know. But, I love some of the old Beatles songs, but when Billy came out, the music just completely changed. And I liked his music just as much, if not better. So started having a little bit of compassion for him and started thinking, how do you live your life like this?
Yeah, that's an interesting point you make, because I've posed that to folks who will write me and say, oh, I can't stand Billy's music and all of this. And I said, well, before you found out about the whole Paul is Dead McCartney conspiracy, did you hate the music from 1967 to 1970? Did you not like Sgt. Pepper? Did you not like Magical Mystery Tour? Did you not like the White Album? Did you not like Abbey Road or Let It Be? What I have found is the vast majority of the folks, before they figured out or before they got themselves familiar with the Paul is Dead conspiracy, they loved his music, along with the biological Paul period from 1962 to 1966. Before people figured out the Paul is Dead conspiracy or the McCartney conspiracy, they were on board with the entire catalog of songs, whether it was the Bio-Paul period or whether it was the Billy period. And then once they had that suspicion that, hey, wait a minute here, Billy is not biological Paul, then all of a sudden they don't like his music anymore. It's kind of an interesting dynamic, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I feel exactly the same way. And like I said, many times I like Bill's music better. I think he was more creative as far as, all the instruments he played. Because I just don't believe biological Paul played more than the bass. Maybe he played guitar. You just don't see that. Once in a while you see a picture of him at a drum set, but I don't ever remember seeing him actually playing the drums in video or anything. So, definitely when the McCartney album came out, the solo one, with him playing all the instruments, that was incredible to me. Blew me away. The guy's talented, no doubt,
No, he is talented, and that's one of the things that I brought up about the biological Paul period. We will see pictures of him behind a drum set or at the piano. These are staged photos. These are photo ops. These are photos and images that are taken to distribute and disseminate out for public consumption, to give the impression that he's a multi-instrumentalist. But he was a bass player and a guitar player. That's essentially it. And Billy is much more than that as far as his ability to be a multi-instrumentalist. So in any case, what I want to do, because I think I might be derailing us here from the nuts and bolts of what you really want to talk about. Now, let's talk a little bit about your 9/11 awareness. As you know, and I've spoken about many times, 9/11, whether it be a date, or 9/11, whether it's encoded in an event, the numbers 9 and 11 from a numerology perspective is what I'm saying. It is an important date, and that date and those numbers are all around the Beatles. So tell us a little bit about your awareness of 9/11 and what your thoughts are.
I ended up seeing 9/11 on my clocks all the time. It kind of spooked me out. It was after reading memoirs, it wasn't before that really. But I started seeing it all the time. I'd look up and it just happened to be that time, either the nighttime or the morning. And I'd see that on a clock, or on my cell phone. And I was thinking, somebody trying to tell me something, So it's felt like that. And, at first I thought it was a warning about we're going to have another 9/11 terrorist attack. That's what I started to think. I didn't really connect it to the Paul was dead thing. And then you find out that's the day he was supposedly, in a car crash or murdered or whatever it was. Ends up being the same day. So part of me thought, it felt almost like, it sounds real strange, but I felt like Paul's reaching out for me from the grave to get his word out, to tell certain things about what happened. And I'm sure that's not true, but it's kind of the gut feeling I had, and I don't want to act like a weirdo, but that's just how I felt. So, 9/11 seems like an important date. Like you said, it's in numerology a lot around the Beatles, and that in a nutshell is what I felt.
Okay, so a lot of people who have looked into the conspiracy, who have read memoirs, have come back to me and said, Steve, that they had very similar feelings, that they felt a motivation and a drive to move forward and to do further research. Many times other folks have reached out. These are other researchers, by the way, people that you and I both know, that really couldn't explain why that motivation was there, but they kept pushing and pushing. That's happened to me. I'm going to be very honest. When I did the first show back in September of 2016 with Sophia Smallstorm, I fully expected that was going to be my first and last show on the topic. It's now 4 years later, and I'm still talking about it. I'm still looking into it, and I'm still finding things. I've had some researchers come back to me and say that since reading the book, they had dreams where Billy showed up in their dreams. And I had that myself, to be honest. I had, I think it was 4 dreams where he was in them. Very lucid dreams. They were very clear. They were like visits, if you will. There was nothing weird or abstract about them. I was in these dreams and I was actually having a conversation with him and talking with him and stuff like that. So again, I don't want to sound weird either, but have you had anything like the dream, or is it just the drive and the motivation to push forward with the research?
I've had nothing in the dreams at all, but the scarier part is that it's in reality to me. And the more that 9/11 came up, the more I wanted to research. Just like you said, I felt like it's like a good mystery novel. You just can't put it down. And I'm still, to this day, I run a PID site. I can't seem to put it down or put down images of him. I see him on Pinterest everywhere. And there's just so much going on that it's only the tip of the iceberg. I still feel like it's, it's just like a book I can't put down.
Yeah.
But then on the downside of that, my wife doesn't believe me. My friends don't believe me. So you're in a small community of people that believe it. And then there's people that just won't accept it. So, but it definitely felt like a spirit reaching out to me. And I do believe in the spirit world. I definitely do. I believe after we die, part of you goes on. And, whether it was him trying to contact me or just some weird fluke, it just felt like that, And still to this day it does.
Yeah, and the conspiracy for me is much more than the death and replacement of biological Paul McCartney. There are so many facets around it that were in play. The whole social engineering piece of it, Tavistock, the occult, the rituals, and all of that. I tell folks that the whole Paul dying bit, for me, has become a subplot. Not that I don't care that biological Paul McCartney passed away. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that the conspiracy for me just didn't stop there. Okay, so once you know and you understand that he was replaced, then there's this other piece of it which is very far-reaching as far as understanding how our reality actually works. Because you can actually take this conspiracy and all of the elements and all of the variables that went into it and are still going into it, and you can apply that to many other things that are going on in the world, other types of psychological operations and so on. It's a very, very deep conspiracy, and it's very, very wide. And that's why, researchers who just focus on that small piece of it, which is I want to prove that biological Paul died and he was replaced, that's good. Obviously, we have to show that and we have to prove that. But my feeling is, and the way I have approached this, it goes beyond that. It goes way beyond that. In any case, I don't want to pontificate here too much. Now, what we want to do, Steve, I think is on the next slide, you're going to talk to us about the standing stones. And if you could just take us through that, because I'm sure a lot of folks who are listening to the show won't have any idea what this is.
Yeah, standing stones, they're called menhirs, if I'm pronouncing that right. What I read from pagan times, they were used as ancient burial grounds or an actual sacrificial site. And then there's other things, too. I just focused on those because that seemed pertinent to what we're talking about. But they're very ancient, and the fact that one's on Billy's farm in the middle of a sheep field seems pretty odd to me. Especially because Paul had purchased that farm. Biological Paul purchased that farm before he died. And I don't know if Paul put that there or if it was already there. I don't know how that got there. It would be interesting if I could find out more about how it got there, if it was just on the land already. But, I believe it could be a burial chamber there, or a sacrifice happened there. But I'm going by conjecture.
No, but it's very interesting because, as you mentioned, and we'll get to a slide that talks a little bit more about the farm, but biological Paul, he did purchase the farm, and then Billy inherited it when he took the role of Paul McCartney. So it is interesting that the farm was purchased by biological Paul. They've got this standing stone on the property, on a hill, right?
Yes, up in like a sheep pasture, right behind the barns on Hyde Park Farm, near Campbellton.
Yeah, so it's very, very odd. And if the property were purchased by Billy after Paul died, that would make it, I think, less, I don't want to say less interesting, but maybe less of a connection. But the fact that the property actually bridges across the two of them, to me, makes it very interesting. And this is why when you were presenting this topic and talking about it on the page that I used to run, the memoirs page, that I found this extremely intriguing.
With memoirs out stuff, it doesn't mention that stone, but it's in so many pictures, though, of Hyde Park Farm. And when I started looking into this, that popped up quite a bit in pictures. And then I'm sure in another slide you're going to get to, there's something else about an album, too. It's just very interesting stone. Like you said, it's almost like a grave marker, instead of like a regular tombstone. It's just gigantic, erect type of stone. And they're all over Scotland, but I found it odd just one up there in the middle of the field. So, It was just bizarre.
Yeah, in the middle of his field. Right.
The other odd thing is with that farm, maybe you're getting that on another slide, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but I found it odd that he kept that farm and he didn't keep any of his other properties in Scotland. He sold off quite a bit of them. Even when he disappeared, when reporters came up there, that was the farm he was on. He seemed very agitated. People came up there to see him, So he's protecting something, I felt like,
Okay, so we mentioned, Steve, an album, and this is very interesting too. So Billy puts an album out called Paul McCartney's Standing Stone.
Yep.
So what do you want to say about that?
Well, it's odd. It shows the same stone that's in that field on the front cover of it. It's very prominent. To me, that whole orchestrational album, it is a pretty good masterpiece. I got to admit, I listen to it once in a while and I enjoy it. And, it's very different for Bill to do something like that. I almost felt like having that stone on the front, it was almost like a tribute to Paul, I felt like, It was, something beautiful type of music for him, like he almost wrote the music for him. I could be dead wrong, no pun intended, but it just seemed like that to me was something he worked very hard on with other people too. And it seemed to represent that he was with the Standing Stone on the cover. I just felt like a tribute to Paul. That's what I felt.
Yeah, and this album speaks volumes about Billy's musical talents and his ability to score music. So let me just, folks, from the slide here, and this will be included in the show. Standing Stone is Paul McCartney's second full-length release of original classical music, coming after 1991's Liverpool Oratorio, and was issued shortly after the release of Flaming Pie. The world premiere performance was held at the Royal Albert Hall on October 14, 1997. The Standing Stone project was composed out of a long poem McCartney authored to describe the way Celtic men might have wondered about the origins of life and the mystery of existence. And Billy used a personal computer and software to help compose, and it was recorded by the 80-piece London Symphony Orchestra, a 120-member choir, and conducted by Lawrence Foster at EMI's Abbey Road Studios. So, again, Steve, like you said, it does appear that there is some kind of reverence to Paul with this album. I would agree with you on that. And then aside from that, is the work that Billy did as far as putting it together, writing the music, scoring it, working with the London Symphony Orchestra, does give us a taste for his abilities. Would you agree?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And wanted to ask you if that date at the Royal Albert Hall, 14th of October, 1997, is there any numerology to that, or did you not? Maybe you didn't check that out. I just wonder if there was.
Well, 14 October is 1 plus 4 plus 1 plus 0, which is 6.
Okay.
There's always something with the dates, always with Billy. So let's go to the next slide, Steve, and the slide is titled Paul McCartney Purchases High Park Farm in Kintyre, Scotland. Of course, Billy wrote the song Mull of Kintyre, which is kind of an odd song for an Englishman to write.
Yep.
Again, here, let's talk a little bit about this because we've already mentioned this, but we'll get into some more detail. But the farm was purchased on June 17th, 1966, prior to the death of biological Paul on September 11th, 1966. So, just tell us a little bit about what's going on here.
Yeah, that's correct. I guess Paul, from what I read, was advised to do it for tax reasons, tax write-off. Found it kind of odd, and I read that Jane Asher was pushing for him to do that too. Other than that, I don't have a lot more details on it, but I believe biological Paul was only there like one time from what I've read and seen pictures of. I think there's a picture of him in a football shirt, which I don't have on me, but I think it shows him and Jane Asher on that farm.
Well, again, I think this is from the Beatles Bible, if I'm not mistaken. That's the source. I'll put the link down below. But the 3-bedroom farmhouse had an asking price of £35,000 and came with 183 acres of land. That's a lot of land.
It is, yeah.
And it was previously owned by a local farmer, Mr. Brown, and his wife. The point here is the fact that this farm crosses over both biological Paul and Billy. And it is strange that we have this standing stone right smack in the middle of the farm.
There was also a triangular, almost like pyramid-shaped garden that looks like in front of the standing stone. I think you have it in that slide. And, that when you think Illuminati or whatever, it shows that pyramid. And, I don't know if that has any meaning to it. I just thought I'd point it out. I thought that was interesting because I don't see many. I'm actually in the horticultural field, and you don't see many triangular gardens planted. It's just usually not the case. So I thought that was kind of interesting too.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't discount anything with Billy. Yes, so now here's an interesting tidbit here. So Billy does a song with Elvis Costello, and it's called Shallow Grave.
Yeah, that's correct. And I was blown away as I started to see all this stuff. I just kept hunting and Googling different names of things, and that pops up, And, it was fitting with what I was working on. And the words to the song are just incredible. I don't know if you want to read it there, if you've got the time to do that, but it's incredible words in it even. It even mentions about the Fabulous Five, which I don't know if that means all the four Beatles plus, Paul McCartney, biological Paul, Billy, I meant to say, or George Martin, but it mentions that even in the song towards the end. Pretty interesting stuff, and just the name of it is different.
Yeah, I can read the lyrics. And also, I believe a version of this song is also on the re-release or the extended version of Billy's album, Flowers in the Dirt. And that's another interesting album title, Steve.
Sure is.
Right. Okay. All right. So here are the lyrics to Shallow Grave. When I fall in endless sleep, I hope that I'll be buried deep. Let me be the one that fortune favors. Even good children got shallow graves. Throw another clown to the lions. Throw another Joan on the blaze. Cast me away on the cruel calm ocean and leave me for days and days and days and days and days. I won't lie in this poor shallow grave. I won't lie in this poor shallow grave. Dig me down deep where the dead men sleep. I won't lie in this poor shallow grave. Bless the poor, 'cause like the rich, they all end up in a ditch. In this world of fools and knaves, even good children got shallow graves. The tinker, the tailor, the fabulous five, nobody gets out of this alive. Dig me down deep where the dead men sleep. I won't lie in this poor shallow grave. Dig me down deep where the dead men sleep. I won't lie in this poor shallow grave. And then it goes again. Dig me down deep, dig me down deep, dig me down deep. I won't lie in this poor shallow grave. So that's very, very interesting, especially the line, the tinker, the tailor, the fabulous five, nobody gets out of this alive. So who are the Fab Five?
Yeah, I don't know what reference that was to, if it's Bill in there, or if it's, like I said, George Martin, I don't know. But, they always called themselves the Fab Four,
Right.
Just have that put in the song, the Fab Five, I thought that was kind of interesting, too. It's a very good song, too. I happen to like blues music, and I really liked it. I had never heard that song. And then when I found it, it was pretty amazing. I thought it was good. I like both artists. I like Elvis Costello and him. So.
Yeah, and what's interesting, Steve, is when I explain to folks about how to understand this conspiracy, the McCartney conspiracy, the Beatles conspiracy, the clues are not found in one place. That's the thing. And they're spread out all over the place. And the clues will be in books. The clues will be in videos. The clues will be in the music. They will be on the album covers. They will be in interviews. And you have to listen very closely. That's how you start pulling the pieces in. A big mistake some people make is that they believe that there is going to be one source which is going to spell it all out for them. And that's just simply not the case. How did you even get a semblance of looking at this standing stone? I mean, what triggered the thought for you to say, you know what? I need to look at this closer, because most people would just see the standing stone there and they wouldn't think twice about it. They wouldn't even know what it was or even care. So what triggered the thought for you?
There again, it felt like a grave mark to me. I just thought it was very odd that there's a stone in the middle of a farm, because usually farmers take stones and they'll put them off to the borders of their property. They won't leave it in a field, especially a field with sheep. Like I just couldn't figure out why that would be so prominent there. I would almost think people would want to move it. but either has historical value or he's actually buried up there, biological Paul. I tend to believe he is. It's just my gut feeling. There's no way I can prove it unless you brought somebody up there and dug up that whole area with an excavator, and I don't think that'll ever happen. It just felt like that to me, like it was some marker point, other than what a menhir stands for. It just seemed odd. I would have felt like there would have been more up there, or it just seemed in like a dead center position there.
But what made you look at Billy's farm? What brought you there? Because that's interesting, and most people wouldn't even bother looking at where the guy lives.
Well, I thought Hyde Park Farm was kind of interesting. It's over in an area of, what is it called, Campbellton, I believe, which a lot of royalty lives, and without spoiling another person's presentation, I can't go into too much detail. But somebody's worked very hard at his lineage, and I don't want to say his name. I thought that was really interesting. That's in Campbellton area where Scottish royalty is. It's very odd because there's a big castle near the ocean there. And, for some reason, I just connected the name Campbell too. Like they say William Campbell, Campbellton. It's part of that name almost, and it's spelled the same way. So I almost started connecting things like that. It almost became all spiritual. I just felt connections to it, and I still do. I'm sure there's more to find. In fact, before we started this, I just found something else, So it just keeps happening. I'm sure I'll find more after this is done.
Yeah, before the show started, folks, Steve and I were just chatting a little bit, and we were saying that, whenever you think you've reached the end of the road with this thing, or you're close to the end of the road, near the goal line, something else pops up. And, if you're intrepid and this stuff interests you, then you're like, okay, well, let me take a look at this. And that takes you down another road. And that's what I was saying before. There is no one-stop shop to figure this thing out, this particular conspiracy, or any conspiracy for that matter. It's the analogy I've used in the past, Steve. It's like a million-piece puzzle, and there's a hurricane outside, and you throw the puzzle pieces out into the wind. So it's as if the pieces are just strewn all over the place, and then you've got to go find them and pick them up, and then start putting the pieces of the puzzle back together again. So again, like I know I said this before to you, you looking at this is an excellent piece of research, because I don't know of anybody else who's talked about this. Really, I don't. I don't know of anybody else who's looked at this. And yes, and we do have a mutual friend, folks, who was looking at Billy's ancestry, and I'm hoping that I can get this person on the show. The work that they are doing is extremely involved. It takes a lot of time to pull it together. So, Steve, maybe our mutual friend will be able to make an appearance and take us through Billy's ancestry.
Yeah, I'm sure he will. And you asked about the farm also, and he was the one, which I don't want to mention his name. I don't think he wants it mentioned,
Yeah.
But he tipped me off. He sent me a video of where I got, another slide coming up about that farm. And it shows like a whole music video, which I'm sure you'll be able to maybe play it on there. I don't know if you can or not, or maybe just the excerpt,
Yeah.
He tipped me off on that, and he saw when I was seeing about the standing stone. And it actually shows a split second of the standing stone in there, and then some other odd stuff I know you're going to get to in an upcoming slide. He helped me on that too, so I want to give him credit there. Very perceptive.
Yes, and this particular researcher, folks, is very, very familiar with Scottish tradition.
Yep.
Okay, so I'll just leave it there. All right, Steve, so now the next slide is Billy and his family planting bulbs on the hill. And what I will do is I will play that video. I'll insert it into the show so people can watch it. Unfortunately, it's a home video, I guess, that Billy shot with Linda, so the quality isn't high definition, but I'll put it in anyway. It's at a quality level where you will be able to make out what's going on. It's just not going to be high def. So what's going on here with the bulbs on the hill, Steve?
Like I said, I'm in the horticultural field. I'm a salesman for different nurseries that grow things, tree places out of Oregon, all over the place. So that really intrigued me because at first I couldn't even tell what they were doing. And the more I looked at it, it looked like flower bulbs to me. And it particularly looked like tulip bulbs. I can't tell a tulip bulb from a daffodil bulb, though. It's not close enough up to tell anything.
Yeah.
But to me, I feel like they were planting tulips there. And as you'll probably show in another couple of slides, there's a spade in there, which in landscaping you use that to cut a bed, to make a shape of a bed or along someplace you're going to mulch. So, that really intrigued me too. I was wondering why him and his family are up in the middle of a field planting a rectangular flower bed, and it was the shape of a grave to me. It was 6 feet long or so. It looked like by 3 feet wide. I mean, why would you plant a garden with just tulip flowers in that sort of shape on a hill in a farm? And you could tell it's out on his farm. It could be somewhere else, but, I feel like it's on that farm. And I feel like it's up on a hill by the views, you see. I wish that the standing stone was shown in those photographs or the film, but it's not. But they do show it earlier. They show the standing stone earlier in that video.
Okay, so I'll play that clip. And it is interesting that when I say they, Billy and Linda, are spending so much time dedicating themselves to doing this planting or whatever it is that they're doing. So obviously this is of importance. And when I watched the video, Stephen, correct me if I'm wrong, there doesn't seem to be a whole lot else going on around where they're working. So in other words, it's not like they're in a flower bed.
No, absolutely not. It's up on a hill. The only thing, both my parents passed away, and I planted things at their grave, not in that sort of shape, it might just be a few flowers here and there. I thought that they were planting, it shows his children there too.
Yeah.
As kind of a remembrance of Paul, it's almost kind of a loving type of memory. They're planting something to dedicate something to him. That's what I connected in my mind. Whether I'm right, it's just conjecture. That's what I feel like they're doing there. They're doing a memorial to him. And it's something that comes up every year. It's like a rebirth with tulips. They come up, they die, and then they come up again. And it's a rebirth every year. And to have it in that shape, I actually wanted somebody I know who lives over there. But then this COVID thing happened. I wanted that person to go to the farm. They live very close to there. And do some kind of drone footage to see if tulips were up around the time of the year they bloom. And unfortunately, we couldn't get that because of COVID, unfortunately. So,
yeah.
But that would have been a smoking gun to me, to have a rectangular field, because bulbs just keep coming up for eternity. They're not going to die. They just keep coming up.
Very interesting. And on the next slide, we have a little collage here. This is something I think you posted up on Facebook. What I did, Steve, was I actually took the posts and I copy and pasted your words here. And you said, if you were following my earlier posts about me thinking Paul McCartney's body is buried on a hill, possibly close to the tall standing stone at his High Hill farm in Scotland, here is more evidence. It was pointed out to me by another member that there was footage of this in a 1970 video of Billy and his family planting what appears to me as tulip or daffodil flower bulbs. The really odd thing is the human-sized grave-looking planting area. These are stills from the video. I feel Paul is buried on that hill. The same informer is going to check out the hill to see if bulbs are pushing up this spring. Hopefully he's successful finding it. And then, as you just said, because of the whole COVID thing, and I guess, we weren't able to get that footage. But I will put the video in. I will play the video so everybody can see it. But it is very, very strange.
Yeah, it happens pretty fast, too, that whole bulb carving thing. And it shows Billy stomping on the ground after they're rolling the turf back. That's the part you got to really watch out for. I don't have the exact minutes when that came up.
Yeah.
But see it, he's up on the hill stomping on it after they plant the bulbs. It's a whole bag of bulbs, so it's one of those burlap bags full of tulip bulbs, basically. It could be other types of bulbs. I don't know, but I'm speculating it's tulips, and you'll probably see in the upcoming slides why I think that.
And you talked about that shovel. And on the slide that we're on right now, the top left picture on the right-hand side, we see Linda, and there's that shovel. It's in the ground.
Yep, square shovel, spade. They call it a spade, actually.
Spade? Okay.
Yeah.
Do we want to go to the next picture, to Lennon's drawing, where he has that spade in his picture?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a good time to do that.
Okay, let's do that. And I know, folks, that this is a little difficult to see. I'll try to find, if I can, a higher definition image. But, Steve, why don't you explain here what you think is going on?
Yeah, I actually think that John Lennon, he did kind of cartoon-type drawings. And, It shows that spade, the same type of square shovel. It's not a pointed shovel, as if they buried somebody. But it shows, Martha the dog, the sheepdog, is in the other video. You'll see that pretty clearly. It shows a dog in this video, even though it's very crude drawn. It's either a dog or a sheep.
Yeah.
It looks like a dog to me. And it shows Bill, I believe, or biological Paul. It shows him in his muck boots there, too.
Yep.
Like the clothes he was wearing when he was on the farm there quite a bit. He showed himself as kind of a ruffian sort of farm type guy. And I think at the bottom, I remember something spelled out there. I believe I told you about what it was. My eyes are going a little bit, so I can't read what it says right now. But something is spelled out at the bottom. I believe it says buried at the bottom, which is another kind of weird clue,
Yeah, I had a hard time making that out, so it is difficult to make out.
Pretty sure if it's enlarged, you'll see buried. It starts far left of the shovel.
Okay.
And it goes across. It gets a little, like you said, the quality of this drawing is not great. And then some other oddities on that. It shows what I believe is Paul's head after his accident. And I think another photo that's been circulating that I don't think we want to put up there, because it's pretty graphic.
Yeah.
But there's another photo that basically almost looks like showing Paul's head blown off. To me, it looked like in the photo, if it's him actually. And this drawing is very close to that. It goes down almost like triangular towards his eyes and nose, which is what's in that photograph that was circulating around. I won't put it on my site because it's too graphic, Some people want to see that photo. I don't know if it's real. I have no clue. But then to me, it looks like blood's dripping down, towards his eyes if you really analyze that drawing.
Yeah.
And there's like a point coming out of the top. I don't know if that's blood flow after the accident. Kind of looks like that to me. If you were doing a forensic analysis of a drawing, that's what I would say about it.
Yeah, and the photo you mentioned, Steve, it's a rough photo, folks. I do have a copy of it, and Steve and I have talked about this before, and myself and a couple of other researchers who, we are networked together. We've all seen the photo, and we all agree that it's very, very difficult to look at. It's gruesome. And the problem with showing it, other than the fact that it is gruesome, is the fact that we don't know for sure if it is biological Paul. Some folks who have looked at it, what they did do was they took a look at the chin, neck, and shoulder area of the photo is a rough one to look at, and they compared it to the chin, neck, and shoulder area of biological Paul. And I have seen this comparison, and I will say that the matchup is pretty close. But even though we can maybe say that there's a possibility that it is biological Paul, I'm like you, Steve. I don't feel comfortable putting it up.
Yeah. People have begged me to even send it to them, and I won't. I still keep it on file just in case whoever could put something like that up. I believe if it's put on Facebook, it will be taken down anyway because of its graphic nature. I believe it would be. But this drawing is almost spot on to what I saw in that photograph, though, too. It has that frayed top of the head. I personally, not going off on a tangent, but I think Paul was chased in his car. I feel like it's like Princess Diana style. I believe she was taken out, too. Just my own conspiracy feeling on it. She was chased because she knew too much about all that's going on in the palace over there. I believe, Paul was chased. I believe maybe he wasn't completely dead when they found him, and then they blew his head off. That's my gut feeling. I don't know for a fact, but I'm just conjecture. The people that wanted him out, he was out. They made sure of it. That's at least from that photograph that I saw, and then seeing John Lennon's picture. I got shivers when I saw this drawing.
Yeah.
Kind of freaky. So,
Yeah, it is a very weird drawing. And just to tag on to your comment about McCartney's accident, in a show I did, or a presentation I did about 2 years ago, it's the Beatles, Paul McCartney, and the Grand Illusion. I talk about how the accident may have went down based upon somebody who contacted me. And they had said that the accident was set up to happen. And the people behind it were intelligence, British MI6 and the CIA. I did present that in my presentation as I presented in a way where I said that a source had come forth and they had explained to me how it went down. So in other words, what I'm saying is that the accident was planned, it was premeditated, but then it was covered up to look like an auto accident. But the accident did include his car, but he was forced off the road, and the collision was staged to happen. And this person went on to say that the people that were responsible for ensuring that it went down properly also had to make sure that after the accident occurred, that he was indeed dead. Okay, so folks, you can read into that any way you'd like, but that's what I was told. So, and again, that's a scenario. That's how I'll put it. That's a scenario. Do I know for sure that that's how it went down? No, nobody knows because we weren't there. But this is what was told to me. This is the same person, by the way, that came to me and explained the whole street Paul aspect of this, Steve, which panned out. And by the way, another person contacted me. Can't say who this person is, and I won't let the name out yet as far as who Street Paul is. Let's just say that during the Melody Maker Awards on September 13th, 1966, in Memoirs, we're told that they pulled out their very, very best double. And this person was an exceptionally good double of Paul McCartney. There are differences, and I also displayed these differences. I believe it was in my Beatles, Paul McCartney, and the Grand Illusion presentation where I showed the person that was at the Melody Maker Awards playing Paul McCartney, and I took his face and I put it right next to an image or a photo of biological Paul, a real photo of biological Paul. The similarities were amazing, but you could also see that there were differences in the facial structure. But I mean, if you didn't examine them side by side, you would just assume that that was Paul McCartney. And so I had a person reach out to me going back, I guess, around 2 weeks ago or so. And the person at the Melody Maker Awards was not Paul McCartney. And I need to talk with this person a little bit more to see if they're comfortable with me releasing the name that they gave me of the person that was playing the part at the awards. So that's late breaking news, by the way, Steve. This, like I said, I was given this about 2 weeks ago, and I haven't gone anywhere with it yet. But the reason why I'm bringing it out on this show is to kind of fill in some of the blanks that people have had with watching that footage. Because, like I said, when you do watch the Melody Maker Awards, most people are assured that that's biological Paul McCartney. And as it does state in Memoirs as well, it is not biological Paul. But unlike Memoirs, this person stepped forward and gave me that person's name. But I can't go anywhere with it yet as far as the name of that person until I can clear it with my source.
Yeah, without making it too long-winded, if I could ask you, is that the same double that would have been in the Memphis backstage interview? He has very round head, barely any neck. I don't know if you know which one you know that I'm talking about, but it's...
Yeah, I do. This is the one where he has kind of like a bowling ball head, right?
He does. It's very round, and then there's somebody else put a video out on that, and then it shows Billy like a year later.
Yeah, I go back and forth, Steve, with the Memphis Paul. His face does appear rounder. He's clearly wearing a wig, and he does look smaller in stature when we compare him to the other Beatles during the interview. On the other hand, he has the scar on his upper lip, like Paul did. But then again, as it's explained in Memoirs, scars and moles were surgically added to Billy. So who knows? But if I had to guess, the Memphis Paul might very well be another double. I'll add the clip to the show, and maybe I'll put a slide in, and we'll let the audience decide for themselves.
Okay.
Okay, so this is what was told to me by this particular source. Right out of the chute, from day one, they had 3 doubles / lookalikes for every Beatle. Aside from biological Paul, there were 3 lookalikes and doubles. So now we have 4 Pauls. The same for John, the same for George, and the same for Ringo.
Interesting.
And that's why the images and the photos that people are looking at and trying to examine and picking up on anomalies and all that stuff, trying to figure out who's who, that's why it is very, very difficult.
Yeah.
Because right from day one, boom, there was 4 of them out there of each Beatle. And this person told me that these doubles and lookalikes were used primarily as decoys, going in and out of buildings and so on. And of course, Billy had doubles as well. In fact, I received a comment on my Paul is Dead channel. It was either today or yesterday. And, somebody was asking about doubles and Billy. Well, Billy had doubles as well. That's why we see anomalies when we look at his timeline, starting from 1966 through current day. Memoirs tells us that even as of today, Billy still utilizes a double.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. And that's why it makes it very, very tough to discern and to decode this thing because, you really, sometimes you don't even know who you're looking at.
Yeah.
You think you do. And again, like I said, the double they pulled out for the Melody Maker Awards, so that's an amazing lookalike.
Yeah.
I'll put that comparison up and you can take a look at it and you'll see, yeah, they are two different people. But like I said, if you ran into them in the street or if you were talking to them or you weren't analyzing their faces, you would think you were speaking to Paul McCartney. Okay, so let's move to, I guess, the Life magazine cover because there is that spade again. Tell us a little bit about this because there's some things you picked up on.
It's got the dog there again. It's the same time period as when they were planting the bulbs. I mean, you could just tell that. And this actual Life magazine cover was not used. There's another one that's shown with his babies and all that,
Right.
Kids. That's the one that was used. I was trying to figure out up near his shoulder, Bill's shoulder, if you got that slide up.
Yep.
I didn't know if that's the top of the standing stone there or not, but it looks like some protrusion there. I don't know what that is, but it seemed odd up there. That's something I didn't even talk to you about before. But you can kind of see the tip of what looks like a rock to me. So maybe this is lower where they planted. It might have been lower than the standing stone for some reason. But I thought it was interesting that the Life magazine logo was put down below as if it was a casket, almost like it would be under the ground. And every Life magazine cover I've ever seen is in the upper right. So that was a little bit bizarre to me, too. And it looks like Martha is looking up towards that stone to me, too. Paul and Linda are looking somewhere else. She's sitting down. It looks like the same area. You can see actually the bulbs in there. If you look really closely, it looks like there's white bulbs down below before they rolled the ground back. That's what I'm seeing.
Yeah, so this is what I picked up from it, right? So you tell me what you think.
Yeah.
We have Billy and Linda looking in the same direction. They're looking ahead.
Right.
The dog is looking back.
Looking behind, yep.
Right? So Billy looking forward, and then Martha, that's the dog's name, right?
Right.
Is looking back. And if that is the standing stone, looking back at biological Paul McCartney.
Yeah, he's looking right at the stone. And I believe that's what it is back there. And I'm only discovering that now as I'm looking at the picture. I didn't even notice that. And that's how it happens with this. You start to notice something else and wow,
Yeah. And Life.
Yeah.
You made the observation that it's down below to the left, but think in terms of the word itself. Life is buried. Life is underground.
Yeah, it's really, really a clue. And that again, I get shivers from this stuff because, I'm looking into this. This is all interconnecting. It's all clues that if you were a cop or something and you were digging into something forensically and you were trying to solve a crime, to me, all this stuff goes together. It's like a puzzle piece.
Yeah.
Or you look at it, why is that down below there? Life magazine never had it below there. And, why is that spade and these flowers and stuff in John Lennon's drawing? Why? It's all interconnected. It's amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing, and great job of picking up on it, Steve.
Yeah, thanks.
So then we have the next slide. It's looking through the bent back tulips. And of course, you've already mentioned to us that it appears that they are planting tulips, possibly.
Tulip bulb, yep.
This would potentially explain the line in the song Glass Onion, looking through the bent back tulips.
Yep.
And we have a photo or an image to the right where we've got all four Beatles behind a bunch of tulips.
That's correct, yeah.
And what's interesting too, Steve, is I don't know if this means anything, but I kind of chuckled when I read it. At the bottom of that image, it says live in Sweden and the Netherlands.
Yep, the dates 63 and 64. So.
Yeah.
And that it has Billy's face in the picture too. I did, maybe it is biological Paul. I couldn't really tell on that picture.
Yeah, it's hard sometimes to pick up on it because so many of these images were blended.
Yeah, manipulated, yeah.
Boy, there are so many out there, folks. they have been manipulating images since day one.
Yeah.
Now, in Memoirs, it tells us that if you want the true pictures of Paul McCartney, biological Paul, then you have to use the album covers. That doubles and lookalikes were not used when they were doing the photo shoots for the album covers. So I guess the best thing to do would be not only to look at the official album covers itself, but maybe even look at the alternate album cover photos that were taken, because whenever they do photo shoots, it's not just one photo, right?
Right.
So they take a bunch of them and then they decide which one they're going to go with. So anyway, so looking through the bent back tulips, and again, Steve, as you said, little clues here and there, right? So looking through the bent back tulips, that line by itself, a lot of people don't give it any thought. They just think it's kind of, it's the imagery that Lennon used in a lot of his writing of lyrics, or at least that's what we're told, the official story. He liked imagery through lyrics.
Yeah.
And so we can chalk it up as that, or we could tie it back to what you have shown us, which is planting tulips at what appears to be a gravesite near a standing stone on his farm in Scotland.
Yep, you pin it all together. And, if you're looking through the bent back tulips, think about that. If Paul is buried under there, and if you could actually see as a dead person, looking through the bent back tulips means he's underneath, because the tulips will be bending. From that perspective, it's from the bottom. It's not from the top. It's not looking at, it just seems like that's what they're trying to say. He's under the bent back tulips. And that's why when I saw those bulbs and everything being planted, I just wish we could get a drone up there at some point. I'm hoping the guy comes through for me eventually. It might not come out in this video, but maybe something future. I'll be able to see if there's reddish colored tulips, or like the color of the tulips in that album cover. It would be interesting, because I think that would be what you would find up there.
Yeah. So let's go to Yellow Submarine. And this is something that, I know of. Yellow Submarine, the movie itself, folks, is loaded up with all kinds of occult symbolism. But I haven't spent too much time on talking about the album cover. So Steve will take us through this because he has looked at it, and there are some interesting clues and points of interest that we should talk about. So where did you want to start, Steve, with the album cover of Yellow Submarine?
With yellow, I thought that maybe there's something to do with the word yellow. I looked up, just Googled, what does yellow mean in different cultures. It says on one hand, yellow stands for freshness, happiness, positivity, clarity, energy, optimism, enlightenment, remembrance, intellect, honor, loyalty, and joy. But on the other, it represents cowardice and deceit. A dull or dingy yellow may represent caution, sickness, and jealousy. But deceit really stood out to me there, because this whole thing is deceit. It's deceiving the public. Many of us believe something that isn't true. I thought that was interesting, because I just came up with that today after I Googled it. I wish I came up with it earlier, because it would have been more part of this presentation.
And as we know, and you and I talked about this before the show, this whole thing with the Beatles and really everything that the Controllers do is all about duality. So when you just read the definition or description of the color yellow, having positive attributes and also negative attributes, that's the duality.
Yeah.
Right? So, and that's what this is all about, folks. We live in duality world. That's how the elite operate. It's just loaded up with occultism. Okay, so let me just take a look here, Steve. One of the things I think we might want to talk about is the fact that the Beatles on the Yellow Submarine album sure look like they're standing on a hill.
It sure does. And, you'd think with a submarine it would show the ocean. And in that drawing, to me, it does not show an ocean at all. To me, it looks like a high hill. And I believe that's representative of the Scottish Farm Hill. I'm actually an artist, too. I do paintings and stuff. I did it as my job as a graphic artist for a while. But, I pick up visual stuff very quickly.
Yeah.
That just stood out to me as that's a hill. It even kind of shows layers. It shows grass, then it shows another layer of dirt. If you look at those colors they're standing on top of. And then you see, if you were doing a measurement in feet, to me it looks like that submarine's about 6 feet down, under. It does to me anyway.
Yeah.
And then to the right of it, after it says the Beatles' Yellow Submarine, to the right of it, it says Nothing is Real. I always thought this album cover had no clues on it. You know, of all the album covers, I thought this had absolutely nothing on it. So, but the more that I got into this, him being buried on a hill in Scotland, I thought maybe this was really trying to tell me something. So a submarine to me would be, you know, when I think of like even getting a submarine sandwich or something, they call them subs. And then that kind of clicked in my mind that a sub, it means substitute. So Billy being a substitute for Paul, that's what I kind of thought. Whether I'm right on that, I don't know. It's just conjecture, like I said. But I believe that Yellow Submarine is a symbolism for a casket. You'll see that there's 3 facing forward on the periscopes, and there's 1 facing behind. The thing is more loaded with clues than I believe anybody has ever thought of, at least from what I can see. You know, and then, of course, you got John Lennon's symbolism on the top there with his hands.
That's the sign of the goat. That's Baphomet.
Okay. And it's right over Paul's head, you know. So this is all stuff I never noticed as a kid, and I bought these albums, you know. And like you said, I went to see the movie. Didn't really see clues in the movie. I mean, I think there probably is. Yeah. But I don't know what they are. I'd have to analyze it more. But I definitely believe that that's showing them on a hill in Scotland, basically. It's all symbolism. And Paul's buried 6 feet down, and nothing is real that's going on.
Right. So the sub would be maybe a casket, right?
Yeah, you're down under something, you know, in a sub. You know, you're not above land. That I thought was a little bit odd. You know, again.
A couple of things that I picked up on, Steve, like you mentioned, John Lennon's making the sign of the goat, Baphomet, over Paul's head. Yeah. Many times we'll see the palm, and the palm, folks, stands for Paul McCartney, Paul M. That's why the palm we see in a number of pictures over Paul's head. We see it on the cover of Sgt. Pepper, in fact. And if we look at Fred, old Fred to the left, we see he has his hand in his jacket, and that's the hidden hand of Freemasonry.
Yep, the old Napoleon kind of thing.
Yep. And then if we look to the right, we see one of the characters has the number 23, which is 5.
Yeah.
So we would think in terms of 5 Beatles when we add Billy to the equation. So we had biological Paul, John, George, and Ringo, and then Billy. That's 5. In fact, in the film, they show the Beatles looking out the portals. We have John, George, and Ringo, and 2 Pauls. So what I'll do, Steve, as we're talking about this, I do have an image of that. So I will put that in the show so people can see that in Yellow Submarine, they're showing us 5 Beatles. Okay, so I'll put that in there. But this is some quick call-outs, folks, for Yellow Submarine, and it is filled with symbolism. And I agree with Steve. They are standing on a hill. The submarine itself, like Steve said, we abbreviate submarine as substitution or a substitute for Paul. And also, a sub can also infer subterranean or below ground.
Right. And then if you put that word in the color yellow, you put deceit with sub, a deceitful substitute, right?
Right.
I get into this stuff, but, you know, whether it means anything, I don't know. But that's what it stands out to me as being.
Yeah, well, I could tell you, Steve, that I think it means a lot more than you might give it credit for, or some of the folks listening, because one of the things that I've noticed in spades doing this work is that everything is a clue. Everything's encoded. Everything has some esoteric meaning. There's some mysticism. There's some occultism. It's throughout this entire conspiracy. And, what might seem ridiculous to most people is not ridiculous for those of us that are looking at it and do have an understanding of how these clues are encoded.
Yeah.
Don't discount anything. Could we be wrong on certain understandings or what we're putting together? Of course we can be. But what I have found is that, when you start to look at it the way you're looking at it and the way others, myself, are looking at this thing, that's how we begin to solve the puzzle. Some of these things we might discard and say, okay, well, it didn't lead anywhere. But in other cases, these strange connections that we think we're making actually pan out. Yeah,
I believe you there. And I've noticed that in that drawing, it shows Paul directly above that submarine, too.
Yep.
Above the periscopes. He's kind of dead center to that. And he's the same size as Ringo. Now it looks like Paul's the smallest guy there with Ringo, So kind of odd. And Paul was a small guy.
Yeah, no, he wasn't the tall guy. In fact, the way they made him look taller was there was, trickery used with the way they took the pictures and the way they positioned the camera. I mean, they had techniques that were in play to keep the deception alive and well. Speaking of deception, I think this is our last slide. It's been a fabulous discussion, a lot of fun. These are two images, and even though it doesn't have anything to do with where biological Paul is buried, they're still very interesting images. So tell us what's going on here.
Showing biological Paul on the left, who we call Billy on the right, who other people think is Paul McCartney. But, it just doesn't match up. You can see his eyes higher, the ear level like you put on there. There's a lot that's different, the way the eyebrows go.
Yeah, just the shape of the face. Billy has an elongated face, whereas Paul had a rounder face.
Yeah, Billy's a huge guy. He's much bigger than biological Paul ever was,
Yeah.
And then, of course, we all know about Stanshall. If you're steeped in this, if you're just tuning in, you probably wouldn't understand this. And I've had a lot of arguments with people that don't believe that Bill is Stanshall, Vivian Stanshall, from the Dog, whatever it's called, band.
The Bonzo Dog Band, yeah.
Okay. And, of course, Phil Ackrell, back from Denny Lane and all that. I'm sure they've seen your video comparisons and stuff. I really enjoyed that. It helped me a lot with it. But I actually put this one together myself because I saw like a morphine picture of Stanshall turning into Billy on the internet. But I never saw anybody do a side-by-side comparison. And I'll tell you, I just flipped out when I put these together. Like I said, I'm a graphic artist. I know about spatiality, if you're doing a portrait or something, about proportions. The proportions to Stanshall to Billy are incredibly perfect. They just match up exactly perfect. And I know you found somebody sent you something too, which maybe you could put in there at some point. But, there's another one where he has a beard, and that matches up perfectly.
Right.
Stanshall had more of a hooded eyelid and that lazy eye kind of a little bit. He had what I believe was just surgery on his eyelid at that point, to look more like Bill does now, to look more like Paul. And they actually did. I Googled about I can't remember the exact term for that surgery is, but it fixes a hooded eyelid. It makes it so it won't be like that. And if you look at those images, I mean, it's darn close. And if he just dyed his hair, dyed his eyebrows, the whole bit, mustache, beard, whatever, he's right on there. It looks already like him, So, and I don't know what age that was for Stanshall in that picture. You might know better, what time period that was.
Yeah, I would say that's probably around 1967 or so. It is interesting, though, that there are people that don't see the fact that he played Stanshall from the Bonzo Dog Band with Neil Innes. It's amazing to me. It's very clear that he did.
Yeah.
And there are people that believe that Vivian Stanshall was a real person. And he wasn't a real person. He was a character that was invented by Billy. And then when Billy's McCartney role got hot and heavy and he had to spend more time doing that, that's when he hired Victor, Street Viv, to play the Stanshall role so that McCartney and Stanshall can exist in parallel.
Yeah.
But, there's no question that he played Vivian Stanshall from the Bonzo Dog Band, and that there were two Stanshalls. There was Victor, Street Viv, and Billy's version. And to the best of my knowledge, Victor or Street Viv never played with the Bonzos. That's how we can delineate the two. Yeah. So I don't know, Steve. People either see it or they don't. That's how I look at it. There's a lot of people that just don't want to, they don't want to see it. And so they just shut down. They just don't want to believe that. I guess maybe the level of deception is that deep.
Correct.
That not only were they bamboozled with the fact that he took on the Paul McCartney role, but that he also played other characters.
Yeah.
And he did play a version of Phil Ackrell with the Diplomats when he played with Denny Lane and Bev Bevan, who went on to ELO fame, the drummer.
Yeah.
And what happened, folks, with the whole Diplomats piece of it was that Billy was the original Phil Ackrell in the band, and then he leased the role to Phil Ralston. Okay, and Ralston was hoping that he could take the role further and make some money at it and all that stuff. But it just didn't pan out. The Diplomats, although Billy tells us in memoirs they did make an album, it's unreleased. It's locked up in some vault somewhere. And maybe someday it'll see the light of day. Maybe. I don't know. So that's how the whole Phil Ackrell piece worked. There were two Ackrells.
Yep.
It was Billy's version, and it was Phil Ralston who picked it up after Billy moved on from it. And there were two Stanshalls. There was the one that Billy played and the one that Victor played, who was Street Viv. So I don't know. And the other thing, Steve, and I know you know this as well because you and I have talked about this on the Paul is Dead pages that we're on and stuff like that. But all we need to do is look at James McCartney, Billy's son.
Yeah, that's totally amazing there.
I mean, he's a spitting image for Vivian Stanshall. How did that happen?
No.
Right? So people will look at that, and I've shown people, and they say, yeah, well, yeah, woo, that looks it looks a lot like him, but I still don't believe it. Okay, you're just in denial. You're in denial if you're taking that position. If you can see it, but then you don't want to see it, that's denial.
Right. And then of course, Denny Lane in both bands, the Diplomats and then in Wings.
It's interesting when you listen to Denny Lane, whose real name, by the way, folks, is Brian Hines. Okay. A lot of folks don't know that either. Denny Lane is Brian's stage name. But it was an interview going back a few years ago. He never mentions Paul McCartney by name.
No.
Right? He says that he played with Billy Shears. But in that interview, Denny never says, what are you talking about? I played with Paul McCartney. He never says that. And then my friend Walt Schnabel met Denny backstage when Denny played in his hometown. So Walt volunteers at this venue and periodically or occasionally. And Walt had written me before Denny played there, and he says, hey, Mike, Denny's coming here to play with his band. And, a lot of times I get to meet the artists backstage. And he says, if I do, he says, I'm going to ask him about Billy.
Yeah.
And so I said, oh, that'd be great, So long story short, folks, and I'll put the link down to that interview I did with Walt in the show notes below. He did ask Denny about playing with Billy Shepherd.
Yeah.
And Denny said, who? And then Walt said, oh, come on, Denny, you know what I'm talking about. And he goes, oh, you mean Billy McCartney?
Yeah.
So we have another situation where Denny doesn't say Paul McCartney.
No.
He calls him everything other than Paul McCartney. He's got, Billy Shears, Billy McCartney. It's just, it gets to be funny after a while.
Yeah, George Harrison's wife saying, hello, Billy. So.
Yeah, that was at the concert for George. Yep.
I'm also on a Vivian Stanshall site on Facebook.
Yeah.
Am I allowed to mention Quay Longfellow? I guess it was his girlfriend. Can I say that on here? I could always cut it out if I can't. But
yeah, Quay Longfellow.
Longfellow. I didn't. Yeah. So anyway, she's on Messenger. I tried to write to her because she posted a bunch of different pictures, and it shows her with the Vivian Stanshall, which is actually Billy, and then it shows her with the old, the other guy that took his place,
Victor.
One you call Street Vid. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it shows her with both, and I just happened to write her a message. I really didn't expect her to answer me. And of course she didn't. She kept silent. But I wrote her and wanted to know, why she was with both. Why with Vivian Stanshall, the young version and the old version. So even then they were trying to hide stuff that way too. It was really bizarre. So, but she didn't answer me. I kind of hoped she would. But she is on Messenger, and she probably gets asked stuff like that a lot. Just finds it annoying or can't say anything.
Yeah.
Add that in. So, but if you need to cut it, I understand.
No. Actually, it's good to talk about this a little bit. So, I released my video going back, I guess, about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. I lose track of time sometimes with this stuff, but it had to do with analyzing McCartney, Stanshall, and Ackrell. And in that presentation, I had shown that there were indeed two Vivian Stanshalls.
Yeah.
There was Billy's version, as you mentioned before, Steve, who played with the Bonzo Dog Band with Neil Innes. And there was Victor, who I refer to as Street Viv, who was married to Quay.
Mm-hmm.
And when that presentation was released, I was told by somebody who was on that page, things got really quiet for about a week. And then after about a week, some people were all up in arms, and they were very angry and upset with me for putting that video out, and I was crazy and all that stuff. But from what I understand, not a whole lot from Quay. So when I do this work, in particular when I was doing the Stanshall piece, I'm never looking to hurt anybody.
Right.
I'm just taking a look at what's out there. And if somebody is a public persona and they're making records and they're making movies and all that stuff, it's fair game, especially when you come across evidence that there were different people playing the part. And so, so my response to folks who get upset with me when I had put that presentation out about Stanshall and Ackrell and all that is don't get mad at me, because that information was revealed in Billy's book.
It was, yeah. That's why I kind of asked her, hoping I get some little answer, but she's just not allowed to say anything, I guess.
Yeah, the information was put out by Billy himself. Billy is the one who spilled the beans and let the cat out of the bag.
Right.
Not Mike. Mike just read the book and then said, let me see if I can substantiate this. Is this true?
Right.
That's all I did. And so when I went about my work, I confirmed, I believe, validated the fact that Billy did play a version of Stanshall and that there was another person playing the character that Billy hired who was on Billy's payroll in order to, like I said before, to allow the McCartney and the Stanshall character to run in parallel.
Yep.
So, again, so I just want to put that out there because I am sensitive to the fact that Quay was married to Victor, and that was her husband. And, he built a career around the Stanshall character. So I don't want to get in the way of that. That's why, to be honest with you, Steve, when I put the presentation out, I just put it out.
Yeah.
I wasn't banging a lot of drums about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I really wanted to push it, I could have continued to really market it and all that stuff, and I didn't. I put it out there. I kind of slipped it in under the covers, if you will, so that it wouldn't make a big splash, because I am sensitive to the fact that, that was her husband and she's still here and they've got children and everything else. So, like I said, I didn't want to make too much of a splash with it.
Right.
But that being said, again, I'll go back to this. I know I'm repeating myself. If there's a bone to pick, that has to go back to Billy.
Yeah, no doubt.
I didn't write the book.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, even in this video, I'm meaning like Billy or anybody any harm. It's hunches I have. So hopefully nothing's taken the wrong way.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be taken the wrong way at all, Steve, because if they didn't want the information out at this time, memoirs wouldn't have been published. That's, plain and simple. And as we mentioned before we started the show, nothing could have been more controversial than me coming out and saying that the Beatles didn't write their music between 1962 and 1966.
Right.
Well, they wrote very, very little of it.
Yeah, you proved it.
Thank you. I like to think that I did prove it. So, that is about as controversial as you can get. And again, if Billy's going to show us images of his standing stone on his farm, and he's going to have an album called Standing Stone, and he's going to write a song with Elvis Costello called Shallow Grave.
Right.
And he's going to put an album out called Flowers in the Dirt.
Yeah.
Sooner or later, somebody or groups of people are going to pick up on this and start to follow the breadcrumbs, which is what you did. And you did an excellent job. So
thank you.
I know we're about wrapped up here, but I just want to say that I think the work that you've done here is great. It's exceptional. And I do believe there is an extremely high possibility that standing stone on his farm is where biological Paul McCartney is buried. It's possible.
That's what I think.
I've had other people write me and say, oh, he's buried here, he's buried there, but they have no proof of it. They're not showing any evidence. They're not connecting any dots. They're just blurting things out. And I always go back to these folks. I said, look, it's not good enough to say, oh, he's buried here.
Yeah.
How do you know he's buried there? It always goes dark, Steve. There's never a response, or they come back with just a bunch of gibberish. And I'm not into gibberish. You've got to give me evidence, facts, circumstantial evidence, connect dots, put logic and reason behind it. Just don't parrot or reiterate whatever it is you may have read or heard someplace else. That doesn't work. But in this case with you, you've connected a lot of dots, in my opinion.
All right. That's great. Thanks. And Very honored to be on your show, too, by the way. Just, the stuff you've done is mind-blowing. It's great. So I feel really honored to be on the show. I really do.
Well, Steve, it's my honor to have you on because you have done an excellent job with this and in other aspects of the conspiracy that you have looked at. When I told folks, when I did the big presentation, did the Beatles write all their own music? I did a lot of research. Obviously, I did a lot of heavy lifting, but there was a network of researchers that I was connected into that were also extremely good at this. And they had uncovered some very, very important aspects of the conspiracy. So it's people like yourself and a lot of other folks that I'm connected into and that I associate with that have done fabulous work and have fabulous insights, So it's not just a one-man show. It's kind of like us all talking and getting together, like doing a show like this and trying to bring more pieces of it together so that it starts to make more sense or, God forbid, we actually solve the mystery.
Team of detectives, basically.
Right, exactly. Yep. All right, Steve, thank you so much for coming on.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Welcome, my friends, to the Sage Quay Radio Hour, your home for free and critical thinking, and I'm your host, Mike Williams. Today, Steve Fawber returns, along with fellow researchers John Lennox and Ralph Pacheco, to further explore the mystery of the standing stone on the McCartney farm in Scotland and whether the stone marks the burial site of biological Paul, who passed away back in 1966. And so, without further ado, here's Steve, John, and Ralph. Welcome, friends. We have a fascinating show today. Steve Fawber is back to take us through more of his research into where biological Paul might be buried. And joining Steve are two of his team members, Ralph Pacheco and John Lennox. John and his wife actually visited Billy's farm as part of the research into the mystery of the standing stone. And so with that, let's move to the first slide and talk about Scotland's right to roam law. And so, Steve, if you can take a moment and take us through that law, it would be appreciated.
So the Scotland's right to roam law, I found that out from another Scottish man over there, that you can go on somebody's property. But John Lennox probably has a little more on that because he actually lives over there in Scotland. So I'm probably just going to let him speak about his trip over there. It was kind of my idea to have somebody go over there, and him and his wife were perfect for it. I thought they had a lot of courage to go up there the way they did, and they did a good job filming and taking pictures and even interviewed some people, which is great.
Yeah, so John, why don't you take us through that? Just tell us a little bit about getting there and what your experience was like, and I would like to talk a little bit about some conversations you tried to have with some of the local folk to see if they would talk about it, and tell us about the freedom to roam and your trek over to the farm.
The trek to the farm, it's very remote, it's very hard to get to. There's no road into it. It's closed off to the public, so we'd depart probably a couple of miles away and walk across fields. And it was very remote, and we tried knocking on the door to ask permission to take pictures and shoot a couple of videos, but there was nobody at the property, although it was lived in and looked after quite well. That was about it, really. Spent a few hours getting there and getting back to the vehicle in Campbelltown. And then we went into Campbelltown and we asked a couple of ladies in a shop about the standing stone, and they just clammed up on us as if they weren't really wanting to speak about it.
Okay, so getting there was not easy. And is that because of where it's located, the size of the property, or the farm being fenced off, or all of the above?
Aye, there was a road into it, but there was two farms on the road, and the gates were all closed and blocked off, so there was no straight route to drive into it. So what we had to do was we drove round about Campbelltown, and in the back entrance there was kind of like a back way. We got at Google Maps and there was a loch, so we found the loch, and then we seen a High Park farm across the fields, and basically just parked as close as we could get to it, and then just got and walked up and down hills. We were walking for quite a good while before we managed to get to it.
Now, the farm is large. If I remember correctly from the first show, it's something like 183 acres. Is that right?
That's about right. Aye, but apparently owns both of those farms on the road up as well. He bought them as well to deter sightseers. But those were working farms, so I don't know if he's maybe got tenant farmers or what in there.
Okay, so you basically had to park outside the farm, outside the gate, if I'm hearing you correctly, and then you had to walk.
Yes, through flip fields.
Okay, and so you did knock on the door.
Yes.
And there was no answer.
There was no answer, no.
And were you able to see inside the house at all or anything like that?
We could see that one of the windows was open, and you could see I've seen pictures before him in with his guitar and that, and you could see like the wood-cladded ceiling. You could see that through the roof light when we walked out across to the stone. But really, that was it. We didn't want to really pry too closely in case somebody was watching us.
Okay, so you didn't encounter any type of security or anybody stopping you and questioning you why you were on the property?
No, there was no one there at all.
Okay. So, and then you spoke to some folks in town, and when you asked about the farm, you said they clammed up. So what question did you ask them?
It was my wife, and they were all right with the farm. We said we were up sightseeing to see the farm. And they says, oh, that's nice. And then she mentioned the standing stone, and she says they both looked at each other and went quiet. Okay, so as soon as you mentioned a standing stone, the conversation just kind of went dark. They didn't want to talk about it. Yes, aye, yep. Sorry, it was really interesting that the way they clammed up, yes.
Okay, very interesting. Now, I do want to say before we go any further, and I think the team here is going to agree, we are not advocating that folks make a pilgrimage to Billy's farm.
No.
Certainly, if you go there, we are not condoning any type of behavior which would be disruptive to anything on the farm, which includes the standing stone, the farmhouse itself, or anything else that's there. So we want to make that very, very clear. And I suspect that after this show is aired, that there might be a little more due diligence put in place by Billy or whoever is managing or living at the farmhouse to ensure that strangers are kept out and away. I mean, that's just a guess on my part. Based upon what you guys are saying with regard to the freedom to roam law in Scotland, there was no law broken.
No.
This was done for research purposes, even though Billy may not appreciate that explanation. But be it as it may, that's what you guys undertook. And we've got some very, very good information out of your trip to the farm, John. So, okay, now, when you got to the farm, and I guess what we'll do is we can move to slide number 2, there's a red door.
That's right.
So, Steve, you supplied me with information about what a red door means, and Billy's door, or the farmhouse door, is painted red, along with the gate going into the property, which leads to the walkway to the door. So what does red mean?
It means actually welcoming over in America. What it would mean in Scotland, I'm not 100%. It also says protection, so I kind of hit on that word. I think it's at the very end of your slide there. It's a protection thing, so I believe they're protecting the body up there, you know. That's just me, how I feel, you know. And it's conjecture again, like always. A few things that John might have left out that I wanted to mention is it used to have a red roof. If you look at old slides of it, it had a red roof, so that's no longer there. And John was actually trying to find the red roof in the distance as some kind of landmark, and he had trouble finding it because there was no red roof. So they replaced it with the red door, the red gates, and it's all well maintained, freshly painted. Another thing I think John might have left out, when he was actually up at the stone, there's a little bit of a video he shot too. Him and his wife heard crackling in the woods as if something was walking through the woods, either a person, an animal, whatever it was. But he felt like he was being watched, I believe, John, right?
Yeah, that's right. It did feel as if a bit creepy, almost. There was definitely cracking, and there was something in the woods, whether it was an animal or what, I don't know, but it definitely felt as if there was something there. Okay.
All right. So possibly an animal, possibly somebody who was watching to make sure that you weren't doing anything disruptive.
I might be watching for a distance, I don't know, but they didn't answer the door even. If they were outside.
Okay, so let's move to the next slide where we have Billy standing in front of the stone with the horse. And then the middle picture is John in front of the stone. And then we have the picture of the stone where we are stepping back from it. So, John, tell us about the stone, the size of it. How tall are you?
I'm 5'11". I'm just a fraction under 6 foot. So it's 9'6". That'd probably be a bit accurate, I think, by looking at it.
It's 9 foot 6 inches, I believe. Yeah, it's 9 foot and I believe 6 inches tall. And the width, I had the diameter, but I don't have it on me. But you can see it's got a lot of girth to it.
And so the size it's on one of the pages, the right size, and it does say 9'6".
Okay, there's the 96, which is 15, which is 6. And of course, we also have, the inverted 9s and 6s. So it could be 9 feet 6 inches, could be 99. It could also be 66. So, okay. So the numerology and the occultism is all around this, which is what we would have expected anyway. Now, John, is the stone itself, is it on a hill or how is it positioned on the farm?
It is on a slight hill towards the front of the farm. As you go beyond the stone, maybe 100 metres, 200 metres, there's a bigger hill towards the front of the property. But it's not, I wouldn't say it's not a great big hill, just a small incline.
Okay, so it's not on a hill, but there is an incline. All right, so let's move to slide number 5, where we have 2 more pictures. On the left, we have a picture of the standing stone, and we're looking at it from the side so we can actually see how deep it is. And it's got some stones around the bottom, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. And then to the right, we have the stone, and we can see the farmhouse. Okay, and as you said, John and Steve, at one point, that roof was red.
Yep.
In the first show that, Steve, you took us through, I had received a comment where somebody said that the farm wasn't real.
I read that. Yep. Okay. I read that.
So I think we can put that to rest. The farm is indeed real.
Yeah.
And but it no longer has the red roof. All right. So if we go to the next slide, on slide number 6, we have these the standing stone, and there's 3 small stones at the base. But there were more than just those 3 stones.
That's correct.
Okay, so why did you focus on these 3?
I just had another theory, and again, it could be wrong, but there's other stones like around the other side. I didn't get an exact count how many because it's hard to actually count around the circle of it, circumference. But I did see a grouping that looked like 3, on the picture there.
Yeah.
And something in my mind just went off that, what if it was the 3 Beatles up there and, to pay respects, they put the 3 stones there separately, said a little blessing or a prayer or whatever they did at a ritual like that and put them there because a long time ago, 1977, there was a movie, Jesus of Nazareth. And I remember watching that, John the Baptist, when they buried him, they put these stones on top of his grave. And I think it was to keep the soul down, they said. It was to keep the actual spirit from rising up from there, which is, I might be wrong on that exact interpretation, but from what I remember reading. And then, maybe the other side was Billy leaving a stone or somebody else, Jane Asher, or whoever else was there, So I thought maybe these stones were left as some kind of homage to him,
Again, this is all theory, folks. And
yes, exactly.
Right? So keep that in mind as we go through this. But as I've mentioned to Steve in a couple of email exchanges, this is the closest, in my opinion, that anybody's ever gotten to where biological Paul is buried. So let's move to the next slide. That's slide number 7. And Steve, you had mentioned the 3 stones and possibly the 3 Beatles. And, as I was putting the slides together to help you guys out, what came to mind was the back of the Abbey Road album. And this is a well-known clue for those who are into the Paul is dead theory. And on the back of the Abbey Road album, we have these dots. And if you trace them, you have the number 3. So 3 Beatles, Abbey Road. I thought, Steve, that your theory could possibly have some merit because it's not the first time we would have seen the number 3 associated with the whole Paul is dead McCartney conspiracy or Beatles conspiracy.
Yeah, as if one of them's missing, to me, like I said, I almost got a visual in my mind, and that's how I started with this whole thing. The first video, it's almost like visions I'm getting. You said you had things happen in your dreams. I'm almost getting visions of seeing 3 Beatles putting stones up by that. That's the big stone, the standing stone. And it's very clear, in my mind. People think I'm crazy thinking that, but that's just how I feel.
Yeah, well, they can think we're crazy. There's a lot of people think we're crazy just for believing that Paul McCartney was replaced. So we could just start with that. But it's okay. We know what the truth is. And this is what I tell people all the time when folks write me and they say, Mike, my family thinks I'm crazy. My friends think I'm crazy. And I explain to them, look, the only thing that matters is that right? Because everybody is at a different level with regard to understanding what this conspiracy is about. Some people don't believe it at all. Others have varying degrees of what they're willing to accept within the Paul is dead McCartney conspiracy. And of course, we have everything in between. So it's about what we're focused on, and it's about what we know. All right, so let's move to the next slide, slide number 8. And this is the standing stone in relation to the left side of the barn. And I don't know, John, did you want to talk about this a little bit?
That was the entrance. That was the way we come in. As you can see, it was a well-maintained little path. And from that path, it just leads into wild fields, basically. The farmers were working. It was all well-maintained. That little burn is you probably can't see there, but we were standing at a gate, and that was the gate, which I think is the entrance to that property. The standing stone was really the first thing we seen of the farm, even from a distance. It was the stone I noticed first, because I was looking for the red roof, and it doesn't exist anymore, obviously. That was about it, really.
And when you said that the farm is well maintained, and we could see that if we look to the picture on the right, we could see how the grass is well maintained. It's cut leading up to the farm, so it's obviously being cared for.
That's right.
So if we move to the next slide, slide number 9, maybe Steve, you want to talk about this a little bit. What were your thoughts about this?
This burn, it actually means a stream. I don't know if that's a Scottish term, because I never heard that over here. Maybe it is, John? Yes. But I believe that's the area where they planted the tulips in that video, because it's down a little bit to the left. And if you remember, when you showed that Life magazine cover, it showed the stone up higher in the field. I think it was over his shoulder. I believe that was the stone. I believe they were down near this stream. And, somebody brought up the point. I'm not sure who it was. It might have been Ralph there. Where do I actually think there would be a body if there was a body? It could be under that burn area, near that burn area where the tulips were planted. Because what I've learned about these menhir stones, the standing stones, is that there's chambers underneath. So possibly Paul would be in his chamber down in that area. Or he could be directly right under the stone. So that, again, it's all conjecture because I can't prove anything. So, but, I have a feeling he could be down there or it could be under the stone. But I do believe he's on this property, in my opinion.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So, and I also want to mention, and we mentioned this in the first show, but just to remind everybody that this farm was purchased by biological Paul a few months before he died.
Yeah.
And it was inherited by Billy. What makes Steve's theory very interesting is that it's hidden in plain sight.
Yeah.
And some of the best secrets are hidden in plain sight because people look right past it. And I think it could very well be the case here that we have this standing stone. I think most people really don't understand what a standing stone represents. I mean, I didn't until, Steve, you brought it to my attention. You started talking about this.
Yeah.
I would say here in the United States, probably most people do not. And so you would look past it. That's my point. If you don't understand it or you don't know, then you're not going to think anything of this stone, which is sitting right in the middle of the field.
I think, Mike, too, that I also speculate that there's other bodies up there of who I don't know. But I believe that stone's been up there since ancient times. I don't believe it was put there. I did a little bit of research and somebody else helped me with that. And he said it was there quite a while and nobody really knows how long it's been there. So it is an ancient stone.
if they had ancient sacrifices there or something, because all these stones were known to be that too, where it would be an ancient sacrifice area. And then they would bury the bodies underneath. Maybe there's some kind of trap door leading up to that. One of the guys on my site mentioned something like that. Could be high tech, just an elevator goes down within the house or in the barn. Just speculation, but.
Okay, so you're saying that it's a marker, could very well be a marker, and there could be multiple bodies.
Yes.
Laid to rest there.
Yes, from ancient times.
All right, so let's move to slide number 10, and I am going to completely botch this. Is it a cairn?
I think it's cairn, but he would probably know better, being in Scotland. Is it cairn or cairn?
Cairn.
Okay, Kieran. I hope I got that right. Steve or John or Ralph, I know Ralph will probably talk more with you as we get into some of the into the morphs. So what exactly is a Kiram?
It's a burial monument. Again, what's it doing up on that hill? Obviously Bill spent a lot of time up there. I also remember in memoirs about him wanting to be close to Paul's spirit in order to feel his spirit in his music and everything. From what I remember, if I'm saying that correctly, maybe Mike, you could interject in that. But I remember he wanted to be close to him. Basically these cairns are either sacrificial sites or burial chambers underneath, from what I've read anyway.
And like I said, Steve, this ensures, if this is where biological Paul is buried, this really does ensure that he is indeed resting in peace in my mind, because it's on the property,
Yeah, no doubt. I think it's peaceful there, John could attest to that. He said it's a little spooky too, and I believe him.
So tell us a little bit more about that, John. Why was it a little spooky?
I don't know. There was just an eerie feeling, especially with the cracking and with crunching in the woods. I don't know. There was maybe a wee feeling as if you were getting watched, but they weren't coming out to make their presence felt. They were just watching you for either inside the house or in the woods.
Okay.
Either that, the caretaker had just went to the pub for the day. I don't know. It was one or the other.
Okay, so it wasn't the standing stone itself that was a little spooky. It was basically the feeling, as we talked about before, of maybe you were being watched and somebody was ensuring that you weren't being disruptive.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
All right, folks, and I'm going to repeat this because it's very important. Like I said, we're doing this because of research. This should not become a tourist attraction. So I'm going to ask that folks be respectful of the standing stone and what it represents on the property. All right, so slide 11, Steve, we talk about tombs and ancient rituals. This is some information you sent over to me. Could you tell us a little bit about this?
Part of this was from Ireland. It says there was a very early prehistory practice of piling stones over the dead person's body rather than digging a grave. Later in time, the Irish buried their dead in 3 types of tombs. And it says a portal tomb, a number of upright stones covered by 1 or 2 capstones, and sometimes placed in a long or round mound. Passage tomb, round mounds with burial chambers in the center, which were reached by a passage leading in from the edge of the mound. And hence, that's what I was talking about. If you were in the house or the barn and there was a trap door under the ground leading up to a tomb. That's what I believe's under there. A wedge tomb, it says, found in area of Munster, a type of chamber tomb where the chamber narrows at one end. But there was also like a Scottish tale, too, in a cave, and I guess it had to be at low tide to reach it, but there was a bunch of people lost their heads in there. It's like in ancient times in Scotland there. It says, I'm not going to read that whole paragraph. I guess people can read it while it's up there. But there were 60 decapitated victims, and that kind of made me think of Paul, where they said he lost his head or lost his hair in some of the songs, and it kind of made me think of that. I don't know why. It just tipped me off a little bit. And some of the stuff it's just ancient human sacrifices,
Yeah. One of the things that I've noticed is that Billy is very clearly tied to and appreciates tradition.
Yes.
A lot of the information you're bringing forth here, Steve, ties into that tradition, and that's why maybe for some folks this might seem very weird and very strange, but after you do the work and you study him a bit, you understand that he has an appreciation, a great appreciation for his heritage, his ancestry, his lineage, his bloodline. And so what you're taking us through here does make sense to me.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, let's put it this way. I mean, it's certainly not out of the realm of possibility because of how he views his ancestry.
Yes.
All right, so let's move to the next slide, which is slide 12. This is kind of an interesting picture, Steve, and tell us about this. What were your thoughts when you put this together?
It's a picture, before Linda Eastman came to the farm, It's probably the earliest picture I have up at Hyde Park Farm that I could find. And at first I thought it was biological Paul, but then when you look at the date, May 1967, you say, no, it's not. It's Bill. And of course the way that's written there, says May 1967, Jane and Paul with Martha at his farm in Scotland. Paul had picked Jane up at the airport upon her return from her long North American tour with the Bristol Old Vic and immediately took her away up to his remote Scottish farm for some precious time alone together. So this is the earliest pictures I could find. It didn't show the standing stone, but it's definitely the farm at Hyde Park.
Yeah, and that's definitely not biological Paul in that picture.
Definitely Bill, yeah.
And that's why I blew it up. I blew the faces up.
Yeah.
And this is what they have done in the past many, many times, especially when Billy was standing next to somebody who was much shorter, and the person he was standing next to was also somebody that biological Paul had stood next to, and we have pictures, and we can get an assessment of height, right? So, and now we know that biological Paul was just a little taller than Jane Asher. And what they've done in this picture is we have Billy leaning.
Yeah.
He's leaning to the left as we're looking at him. It's his right. And this was done clearly to lower his height, because if he was standing straight up, if we repositioned him, he would tower over Jane Asher, and it would be very clear that this is not biological Paul.
That's correct, yeah.
And the other thing, Steve, is I know we'll get into this a little later in some of the other slides, but is he holding what we would consider a shepherd's crook as well?
I was going to bring that up. It looks a bit smaller than what we're going to bring up later.
Yeah.
To me, it doesn't look like that exact same relic, but we're going to get into that for sure.
All right, so we're not sure then if what he's holding there, it looks like a cane, obviously, but I was wondering if the cane was also representative of the shepherd's crook, and we'll get into that a little later. The last thing I wanted to mention on this slide is that he's wearing a shirt with the number 22 on it, and 22 is a master number in occult numerology. So I don't think there's any possibility that that was just by chance that he stuck on a sports jersey with the number 22 on it. And talking about the occult, we'll move to slide number 13, and we're going to shift away now from the farm, and we're going to get a little bit into Aleister Crowley and his possible ties into Billy. So slide 13, it's titled Crowley's Influence. And Steve, what do you want to tell us about this?
Yeah, at first I didn't believe that Crowley was Bill's father. And the more you delve into it, the more you look around, there's tons of clues that make me believe he is. I happen to find this. This is somebody else's work on the right-hand side of that, beside the picture of Crowley.
Yeah.
If William is Crowley's son, Crowley would have been 62 when Billy was born, 1937. So he was my age then. So, it's old to be having a kid, but it's possible. It says, we noticed similarities when comparing a young Crowley to James McCartney. The family bloodline ties could explain Crowley's influence on Billy and the Beatles. If not Billy's father, then he's a student of Crowley, because there's all kind of things through Bill's work leading to Egypt and all that, if you really look into it.
Yeah, well, all of Crowley's, his religion and his philosophy goes back to the Egyptian mysteries. And you're right, Steve. Billy is definitely an acolyte, a disciple of the Egyptian mysteries. His recent album, Egypt Station, has all kinds of clues and symbolism that has to do with Egypt. Crowley died in 1947. He died at the age of 72, and 7 plus 2 is 9. And in memoirs, of course, Billy tells us for the first 10 years of his life, he was tutored by Aleister Crowley. I don't know, to be honest with you, whether Crowley was his biological father. I believe it's very possible, but I will say that he is definitely bloodlined to Aleister Crowley. In other words, they share the same bloodline, going back up through William Wallace of Scottish warrior fame. And this was a clue that was given in Memoirs in the Blue Book, the 9 after 909 edition. There is definitely this Crowley tie. All right, so in any case, what we'll do, I guess, is let's move to the next slide, slide number 14. All right, so on this slide, Osiris Risen, we have an image on the right, and on that image we see Billy on the left, and that's Aleister Crowley in his ritual garb on the right, and we can see that they're making the Osiris Risen symbolism. This symbolism, we see this within the entertainment and music industry over and over and over again. In fact, if you did a search on the internet and you searched Osiris Risen celebrities, artists, entertainers, you're going to get a ton of imagery showing this. Osiris Risen represents the pentagram, and it's the attitude of resurrection. Osiris is the Egyptian lord of the underworld and judge of the dead, brother, husband to Isis, and one of the most important gods of ancient Egypt. Osiris is the central figure of the ancient Egyptian religion, and the chief fundamentals of the cult were the belief in his divinity, death, resurrection, and the absolute control of the destinies of the bodies and souls of men. The central point of the religion of Osiris is the hope of a resurrection in a transformed body and of immortality, which could only be realized through the death and resurrection of Osiris. And at the bottom of the page, I inserted a note from Manly P. Hall's book, The Secret Teachings of All Ages, and it says, "The dying god shall rise again. The secret room in the house of the hidden places shall be rediscovered. The pyramid again shall stand as the ideal emblem of solidarity, inspiration, aspiration, resurrection, and regeneration." This is all tied into everything we see today, the occult symbolism throughout our reality, not just through the music business, not just through the entertainment industry, it's everywhere. We can see that the Egyptian religion, where Osiris is the central figure, is pervasive. So this chart in itself may not tie Billy to Crowley as his father, but it certainly ties Billy into the religion of Osiris.
You know, I think there's quite a resemblance to even Bill and Crowley. I know he's had surgeries done there, but there were some morphs that were done that we did, and I know we're not using them on here, but, you know, even Stanshall morph into Crowley and Bill into Crowley. There's definitely some resemblances when you put them together. I know we're not really showing them here, but I wanted to mention that if people want to dig and take a look, it's interesting to see the resemblances of how they look alike, you know, in many areas.
Well, I have the morphs, and what I'll do is I'll put them in to the into the presentation. And the thing too, Steve, even though Billy's had the surgeries, as we know, the surgeries are not holding together like they did when he was younger.
No.
So in this picture, what we're looking at on slide 14 is a version of Billy where the surgeries are not holding together, and he's looking more like himself.
Right.
So if I compared this picture to what he looked like pre-surgery playing the Vivian Stanshall character, we would see a lot of similarities.
Correct.
So I think that your point that there are similarities between what Billy looks like and Aleister Crowley, if Crowley is indeed his father, it's very possible. And like I said, what I'll do is I'll put the morphs in, and the folks watching this, they can decide for themselves. All right, so on slide 15, Steve, you sent me a copy of the Help album. Actually, it was an email you sent me, and you talked about the occult symbolism on the Help album, and I'll explain this too real quick. So when folks look at the Help album, they think in terms of, they're spelling out the word help, and that's not what they're doing at all. In fact, the figures that you see above the Beatles, I found on the Thelema website, and you can see the link is down below if you want to check it out. And these are ritual signs. So we have George Harrison in the first position. He's doing the Osiris slain or the cross. Also, George Harrison is wearing a top hat. A top hat is another symbol of Freemasonry. We have John next, and he's doing Typhon, the trident. And Ringo is doing the earth symbolism. And that represents the god Set from Egyptian mythology. And then if we move over, we have Paul McCartney, biological Paul McCartney. He's doing the letter K. And the reason why he's doing K is because Aleister Crowley, when he referred to his magic, he added a K at the end. So it wasn't M-A-G-I-C. Crowley spelled his magic M-A-G-I-C-K. So what the Help album is actually representing and what it's symbolizing is Aleister Crowley's magic with a K.
Amazing.
And that's why they have Paul McCartney doing the K, because biological Paul McCartney was the sacrifice. So he's part of the magic. There is a magic aspect to the Beatles as well. So there you go, folks. That's the Help album. If you want to dig further, like I said, the link there is at the bottom of the slide, and I'll put it in the description box as well. You can click on it and take a look for yourself. Okay? Anything else, Steve, or anybody else wanted to add about this before we move on?
Yeah, there was a picture of Vivian Stanshall that's very similar to the Osiris character that's in these pictures right here, which when I first saw these pictures, and it's like, it's weird when we get clues with researching. It's like someone may post a picture, and then within minutes something pops up. Like I came across this picture with Vivian Stanshall where he's standing in a lake and he's wearing a black garb, and he's not wearing a hood, but he's wearing a 3-pointed hat. And it's very similar. It just reminds me so much of this character of the Osiris. I know this. It seems like with the Vivian character, Bill is able to do a lot more on Crowley himself.
Yeah, well, we'll get into that, Ralph, in a little bit. And but if you have a picture of Stanshall, the one you're talking about, send it over to me.
Okay.
And I'll slip it into the presentation.
Okay.
Okay. Well, the net of it is, occultism is all around the Beatles. The Beatles are immersed in it. And this is one of the aspects of the conspiracy that I've gotten into and you guys have gotten into that a lot of people have a lot of difficulty with. They're okay with going down the road that says biological Paul McCartney was swapped out. It's like, oh, okay, I can get my arms around that. But as soon as you start stepping down into some deeper aspects of this conspiracy, the magic, the ritual, the occultism, that's where a lot of people jump ship. I mean, they just are not comfortable with it. They don't want to accept it. It's very disruptive to their belief systems, their worldview. But the truth of the matter is, and you tell me if you agree, Ralph, the evidence is overwhelming that the Beatles were immersed in the occult.
Yeah, I believe so. And everything was completely planned out. There's just no way. There's so many clues that we come across. And yeah, you almost think like you're crazy when you're researching this stuff. It's just, you almost don't even trust your own instincts at a certain point because it's just, there's so many clues out there. And I can't believe that people have this much time to do this.
Well, it's one of the most elaborate psychological operations in modern times.
Yeah.
It really, really is. And as I've mentioned, in a couple of other videos, that's why the McCartney and the Beatles conspiracy is so important to understand. It's not just about replacing a guy in the band. That's really a subplot for me, and I'm sure for you guys as well, because it goes way beyond that. Once you get into the other pieces of the puzzle, as an example, you begin to understand very clearly the pyramid of power, secret societies, which includes Freemasonry, the Illuminati, Tavistock, of course, mind control, social engineering. It gets into the drug culture. We just talked about Aleister Crowley and his magic. There's occultism, which includes numerology. There's mysticism and rituals. And, of course, it all gets wrapped up into Luciferianism and Satanism. And, again, this is the dark aspect of this, that a lot of people have a very difficult time with. But it is what it is. And as you were saying, Ralph, when we start to dig in and we look, it's all out there. When you don't know, it's easy to look past it. It's like what I was saying before about the standing stone. I mean, the stone is there at the farm, and if you don't know what a standing stone represents, you don't think anything of it. But it's a clue that's hidden in plain sight. And it's the same thing with the Beatles album covers as an example. I mean, there's no question, if you look at the Help album cover, and once we see the ritual signs that are Crowley's ritual signs from his rituals, his religion of Thelema, that's what they're doing. There's no question when we look at the second album with the Beatles, the UK release, that there's one-eye symbolism on all four Beatles on that album cover, and it goes on and on and on. And we'll get a little bit more into Sgt. Pepper because you guys gave me some great information, additional clues on Pepper, occult symbolism, and we'll take the audience through that in a bit. So let's do this now. Let's move to, we're going to stay on Crowley, and we're going to shift, though, from Crowley, and we're going to kind of get into the whole Stanshall piece, Ralph. And so if we go to slide 16, and let me just shift back to Steve for a second, because Steve had sent me this picture. What is going on here, Steve? When you got this picture, when you first took a look at it and you downloaded it, what were your thoughts as you were taking a look at it?
Another Scottish guy had posted this picture on my PID site, and he didn't really see what I saw in it. He saw something totally different. I almost didn't do this video because of that, because he totally thought this was something else. And I still want to stand by it, because what I see in it is the standing stone behind Crowley's head. This is a Crowley self-portrait from the 1940s. What I think is interesting about it, somebody else thought it was a hat on his head, like a cone head type hat or Egyptian type hat. To me, I see his curly hair on the top, his curly reddish hair. If you really look close, you can see the different texture. And then you see that whole shape of a stone that I think, John Lennox can say that's pretty equal to the shape that we've seen up on, on the farm. At least from the pictures I see, it's definitely the same kind of shape. It bows at the top a little bit. It is painted brown, where the stone is more gray. But, I thought that stood out to me so quickly when I saw this painting. And then finding out it's a Crowley self-portrait, and then seeing, what we're going to bring up pretty soon, there's a shepherd's crook in there that he's holding. And I thought it was bizarre that it showed a head, like a beheaded person on it. And one person told me this might have been from, I believe, a potato famine or something like that, so I don't truly know what he's trying to represent here. But I can tell you that shepherd's crook is in a lot of pictures coming up that we're going to show. And that really floored me, too, the fact that this crook is in there. And it's exactly like the ones you're going to see in pictures coming up. And there's other symbolism in there you can see. I don't exactly know who the other figures are in there, but I have some speculations that we'll see, too, coming up.
Okay. And then the thing about whether that's a pointy hat or not, when I looked at the picture, Steve, I didn't think it was a pointy hat. And
no.
One of the things I've learned to do as I've gone through this whole process of analyzing images and pictures as I'm doing this whole Beatles conspiracy is to take a look at everything that's in the picture. In other words, don't just focus on that. So as an example, if we look to the left where the hawk is, right? We believe that's a hawk.
Yep.
That's also stone. And look how the stone was depicted, how it was painted with some beige, light brown, dark brown coloring, right?
Yep.
And we have the same coloring behind the head of Crowley.
Yep.
So that tells me that is indeed a stone, because in other depictions of rock or stone in the image, that's how it was painted.
Correct. Yep.
Okay, so that's just my 2 cents on it. Now, we're going to move to the next slide, and I found this to be very, very interesting. So when you sent this over, I was like, okay, this is starting to make sense now. So let's move to slide 17, and wow, was the Stanshall character based on Aleister Crowley?
Yeah, it's funny. It never showed Aleister Crowley. It showed him bald or with a hat on, or didn't ever show him with red hair that I could see. Yeah, there is actually a morph Ralph did showing him with hair, but because it was black and white, you didn't see if he had reddish hair. Thought it was very interesting, too. Just looks like the same character.
Yeah, well, let's move to slide 18, and we can really see the similarities. So there you go, folks. A side-by-side comparison of the self-portrait of Crowley, and then to the right, we have a depiction of Vivian Stanshall, and we can see the eyes look very similar, the mustache, the beard. It's really very interesting.
Yeah, it is. Another interesting fact, if you take a look at Bill's paintings, he almost paints in the exact same style as Crowley. You know, it's a little bit freaky. You go look through his paintings and then look through Bill's paintings, and it's almost painted in, I would say, the same medium or whatever, and just more flat, kind of almost maybe impressionistic would be the word. It's almost the same style if you look how he paints. I think that's interesting too. And on the previous slide, that stone is up on a hill too. It looks very much like High Park Farm. I'd be willing to bet that's a painting depicting High Park Farm, even though somebody else I know doesn't think so. I do. So I'm just saying my 2 cents on that.
Well, it's your research and your presentation.
My 2 cents. Yeah, so yeah. I think it is that place, you know?
Yeah, if somebody else has a different opinion, they should come forth and present their different opinion.
Right.
Okay. Like I said, we're going through theory here, folks. That's what we're doing.
Yeah.
All right. So let's move to the next slide, and that's going to talk about the hawk symbolism. And what about the hawk symbolism, Steve?
When I see things in a picture like that, I really wanted to check out what symbolism of a hawk is. And it says, here's how seeing hawks often may give insight into your life. And maybe you can read that better, Mike, on your screen, because it's very small here for me. If you want to read the depiction of a hawk, please.
Okay, yeah. So it says that hawks scan their environment from high above the ground, looking for potential threats and sources of food. If you see hawks showing up in your life frequently, it may be a call to see things from a higher perspective and focus on your observation skills. The hawk symbolizes the ability to use intuition and higher vision in order to complete tasks or make important decisions. Animal guides can deliver important messages to us from beyond, and hawks definitely serve as animals that can heighten our spiritual awareness and help us along our paths. I would say, Steve, that since Crowley was very much into symbolism, that the depiction of the hawk, along with everything else in the portrait, would certainly seem to be something he would do. And so I think everything that's in the portrait is there to illustrate a message. So in other words, what we see is supposed to be there.
Yeah.
All right. So we talked about what we believe is the standing stone behind Crowley's head, the hawk. And I also want to mention, I forgot to bring this up, it looks like that Crowley's flipping the bird.
Oh, yeah.
He's got his middle finger up. And we're going to talk about the shepherd's crook in a little bit. Now, there's two people in the portrait that we don't know who they are, but Steve, you thought that perhaps if we go to slide number 20, it could be some royalty.
Yeah, this whole Argyle thing, I believe they are in Billy's bloodline somewhere way back. But to me, that looks like the guy next to him with the black hair, which is Archibald Campbell, the first Duke of Argyll, and I'm speculating Agnes Douglas, Countess of Argyll, is the lady in that picture, because she has a nose and a chin very similar to that, if you take a look at it. And Ralph actually put these paintings in another type of conglomeration that I know we just wanted to focus on Stanshall, but we put them all in, and I'm going to mention he actually put Paul's head on the shepherd's crook. It was kind of powerful graphic, really. I thought it was interesting what he did with it, though. It's kind of interesting when you put it all together.
Yeah. So Ralph, do you have that morph?
Yeah, I have the picture, so I'll definitely send it to you.
Send that over to me too, and I'll put that in.
Yeah. Sometimes you just have to have a little fun with this.
Yeah. Oh no, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, if you don't have some fun with this stuff and you're not experimenting, the experimenting part of it is actually what helps to bring things together, right?
Exactly.
Because you have to think outside the box. If you don't think outside the box, then, you're going to just see what you used to see. So if you want to see something differently, you got to open the aperture of the camera.
Yeah.
Okay, so Steve, let's move to slide number 21 now, and it's the shepherd's crook. And just tell us a little bit about what that symbolizes, because we see that a lot with Billy.
Yeah, so I saw the shepherd's crook, and I really thought I'd seen it before. It's kind of like a deja vu type of thing. But what it symbolized, it says, what does this shepherd's crook symbolize? The shepherd's crook stood for kingship and the flail for fertility of the land. By late pre-diastolic times, the shepherd's crook was already an established symbol of rule. The flail initially remained separate, being depicted alone or on some earliest representations of royal ceremonial. So there again, it must be a royal ceremonial painting there, I would think.
My take on it is that, based upon what we have on the slide here, that the crook is symbolic of kingship, royal ceremonies. So again, we're going back to royal bloodlines, blue blood types of lineage. And that's what I believe is being depicted in the self-portrait of Crowley. And we're going to see this now with Billy as well. So if we move to slide 22, so just keep in mind, folks, the shepherd's crook, right? We're talking about blue blood, bloodlines, royal ceremonies, kingship, fertility of the land. And on slide 22, we see Billy has the crook, and this is from the Life magazine. Tell us a little bit about this, Steve.
Yeah, this Life magazine was when it was being said that Paul had died. You know, that's when the rumors first came to surface. And I guess a group of reporters went up there and they found him at his farm, High Park Farm, which is where that picture's taken, with Linda and his children. It shows Heather, Linda's daughter, which he adopted, shows her holding that crook, the shepherd's crook. You can see almost the same coloration type of thing, even though these are black and white pictures, but you can kind of see that the rounded cane part at the top is light, like in the picture Crowley had in this painting. So I would think that this was a relic that was handed down through time, even possibly as far back as Egyptian times. It looks very Egyptian to me. I mean, I tried to research some other crooks like that, and it looks really old. It looks like an old relic and maybe something from even their own bloodline handed down through time. It's also a shepherd type of thing, and you think of Billy Shepherd or Billy Shears. I thought that all kind of tied together too, you know, with the shepherd's crook. Even the name of it, Shepherd, you know.
Yeah, and it's interesting that on the Life magazine cover to the left, Steve, right above the handle on the crook, it says Paul and his family last week in Scotland. So, you know, when I look at stuff like this, I don't believe that it's by happenstance where they put words, how they take the picture, and so on. So I believe the wording above the handle on that crook is telling us Paul or Billy is Scottish.
Yeah. And to take a look at that draws your attention with the words right there.
Exactly.
Yeah. And, you know, the other picture, I guess that was an alternative picture there where he's waving to the right. I don't think that's the one they used, but it's the same. You can tell it's the same clothing and everything.
Yeah.
But, you know, I knew I recognized that from the painting. That's why I started searching around at the Life magazine cover.
Yeah.
Because I had seen that crook before, you know, and it's exactly the same.
And again, I go back to that picture we looked at with him at the farm with Jane Asher. And was it a cane or a crook? But I don't know. I think it was representing a crook. That's my take. All right. So then we go to slide 23, and we have the shepherd's crook and the zebra. And I could just take the audience through this, Steve, but it's the blend of the opposites. So zebras have black and white stripes. Black and white represent opposite meanings. Hence, they signify contradicting symbolism. Just like black and white are two extreme poles, zebras are highly adjustable to the situation. They can be both adaptable as well as determined when it comes to survival. Because of this, balancing attitudes in times of trouble, a zebra always finds its way out of a tight spot. Among many other things, zebra symbolism denotes that things are not as cut and dry as black or white, right or wrong. Everything must find balance in the world. Every aspect of life requires balance. And so when we talk about black and white, and I've discussed this many times in many presentations and shows, we're talking about duality. This is why we have the Freemasonic checkered floor. And in this picture, it's interesting, we have the shepherd's crook on the left, and that's from Wikipedia. And then on the right, Steve, you supplied this image here of the zebra holding a shepherd's crook, which I found to be very intriguing.
Well, reason I put that in there is that was on an I Am a Phony video. So, I don't believe it's trademarked or anything, but to have that shepherd's crook in there, it looked like the same one on the cover. It's got the light top again. It looks somewhat Egyptian. And then so I thought the zebra has something to do with it, I've even heard rumored that Bill might be doing these I Am a Phony videos with somebody. I don't know if it's true. And I don't want to promote somebody else's videos, but, he has some interesting videos that come out too. And that was a still shot I did, from that. Anyway, I thought it was interesting.
Okay, no, very good. I Am a Phony is a very good site, and I spent time myself looking through the videos and picking up on various clues. The only thing with I Am a Phony, a lot of people find it to be too cryptic.
Yeah.
And so it becomes a little difficult sometimes to pick out, what's really going on or what the message is. But in any case, yeah, I recommend it. I recommend there and my channel. So, all right, let's move to the next slide. And we're talking about black and white and duality. And of course, Steve, we have, Billy's Who Cares video, which is just oozing with occultism and Illuminati symbolism.
No doubt. And I think the first thing I noticed in that video was all the black and white, and that's why I wanted to include the zebra in this video we're doing. There was just a lot of the black and white throughout that whole video. Even the people's faces were painted with that duality look to it. So they're definitely talking about the zebra, I believe. You're going to have to read that paragraph if you want to read that, because it's real small on my printout.
Yeah, no problem. I'll read it. So now we're taking a look. This is a still I took from the video, folks, from Billy's Who Cares video. We could see we have the hypnosis spirals in the background. In the memoirs of Billy Shears, Billy tells us that he was in a trauma-based mind control program, his earliest memory going back to the age of 3. And the other tip-off from the video and this screen capture is you can see on his left lapel or left side of his body, he has the monarch butterfly, monarch mind control. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about the zebra. And the zebra represents love of freedom. So zebras love being free and wild. It is impossible to tame one, although people have made numerous attempts in the past. They will never let humans change that anytime soon. Human beings are born free. It is our fundamental human right to live our lives. The zebra animal symbol teaches us to love our freedom and not to be beholden to someone else's rule. Don't be crushed by false beliefs or let anyone dominate you. The zebra salutes those who have been through a tough time but kept their free spirit. It symbolizes the free and wild spirit that lives in everyone. Because of this trait, the zebra spiritual totem is a symbol of freedom. And this does tie into Billy because, as he explains in the memoirs of Billy Shears, he does talk about humans unshackling and stepping away from all of the rules that encumber the human race. Now, I'm saying this, folks, not because I'm embracing Billy or embracing Luciferianism. I'm explaining what he's telling us in the book. And of course, Billy will explain in the memoirs of Billy Shears that he's gone through some very tough times, going through the transformation, becoming the character of Paul McCartney, leaving his old life behind, living a life of somebody else. And probably one of the major reasons, I believe, and I think the guys on the call also probably agree, is the reason that he came out with the memoirs of Billy Shears is because no one knows who he really is. Nobody knows who William Shepard is, and he's the guy that's been playing the character of Paul McCartney since 1966. He's the primary replacement, I should say, through today, and everybody thinks this guy is someone who passed away 54 years ago. So the struggle in Billy's mind is real. So I think that little passage there, Steve, that you sent over about the zebra and the one in the prior chart does tie in very significantly into Billy and his philosophies and where he's at right now, especially with regard to disclosure.
Yeah.
Yeah, because in memoirs, it's not just about Billy telling us about his struggles and what he had to go through. And I do understand that these were choices that he made. So I'm not siding with him one way or another. Like I've mentioned, all I'm doing is explaining what he is telling us in his narrative in the book, but also in memoirs. There's a lot of information, especially in the footnotes, that talks about the pyramid of power and talks about the deceptions, it talks about the lies, the myth of the Beatles, the myth of the Rolling Stones, this whole black and white duality aspect of it, which is represented by the zebra. It ties in. All right, so what we're going to do now on slide 25 is we're going to get into some yellow submarine clues above and beyond what we showed Steve in the first presentation. And I guess what we could do here is we could turn it over to Ralph, because he's done some fabulous work to uncover something that I think is remarkable. So why don't we move to slide 26, and Ralph, if you wouldn't mind taking it from here and just explaining what you did here, would be great.
All right. Okay, so I think this was actually after your guys' last show. I think it was like that Saturday, we just start finding stuff. And Steve mentioned that look at his pants. look at Paul's pants in the album cover. It's the stone. And it's clearly representing, like, and most people do believe that the submarine represents a coffin. So in the picture next to it, I went ahead and I got rid of everybody else, just kept the pants on there to see the stone, so you can actually see the stone itself. I put Paul in the picture down below, and to me, there's clues in everything that they do. It basically says he's buried underneath a stone. It's just so clear once you see it, and I can't believe we haven't seen it before. I'm sure somebody else has saw it before, but
I don't think so. This was actually quite amazing. So, yeah. So Steve, you're the one that said, look at his pants.
Yeah, I just noticed it looked like kind of like if you squint your eyes, even like I do that because I'm an artist too. You squint your eyes, it kind of stands out even, and its pants, the one leg is almost like the shadow of the stone.
Right.
And, with John being there, he saw the stone better than us, but it is kind of like a long 9-foot stone. It's pretty narrow from certain angles, and it's up on the hill, it's got the casket down 6 feet under, so they're definitely trying to tell us something about this stone.
Yeah. Well, the other thing I noticed, Steve, was, if we look at the picture on the left, which is the Yellow Submarine album cover, look at the feet of the other Beatles, and they have their feet placed right near the base of the stone. So when you spoke earlier about the 3 stones at the base of the standing stone,
you're right.
Stones at the base, right? I thought, wow, I was looking at that and I thought to myself, maybe. But in either case, the fact that you guys picked out his pants and said, we think that might be the stone, and it's on a hill, and then, Ralph, I see you placed biological Paul McCartney's body in the Yellow Submarine. And we talked about this in the earlier show. In the first show, we said that the submarine represents sub or below, subterranean.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
So, and in the song Yellow Submarine, they talk about the sea of green. Well, the sea of green is a sea of grass buried below the grass. Really, this is fabulous. And we're going to show another slide, folks, in the next couple of slides where Ralph captured the morph, and you'll be able to see how this maps to the slide I'm going to show you next. And on slide 27, guys, we have Linda McCartney's standing stone photo. And so we have the horse. When we began the presentation here, we saw that Billy was in front of the stone and he was holding a horse by the reins, right? So the horse is symbolic of something as well. This is a picture that Linda took, and you can see the stone in the background. And then what I did was I showed the back of Billy's album, which is titled Paul McCartney's standing stone, and we can see Linda's picture was used for the back of that CD sleeve. Now, what I want to talk about is, and this is important, I think, the album is called Paul McCartney's Standing Stone. So it's apostrophe S, meaning possessive. It's Paul McCartney's. It belongs to him. It's Paul McCartney's Standing Stone. The album didn't say Paul McCartney Standing Stone.
Nope.
Like Billy's album, Paul McCartney Flowers in the Dirt. Paul McCartney Driving Rain. It's Paul McCartney's Standing Stone. So Billy is giving us a clue here. He's telling us this standing stone is tied to biological Paul McCartney. It belongs to him. Would you agree with that, Steve?
100%. Yeah. And, I've had other people that I feel are really prominent tell me it's his stone. I can't mention who they are actually, but, it's something that I believe it's his stone. Have confirmation, I feel like, In what way? I don't know. It's a monument. Me, I thought it was something else than just a monument,
Yeah. Well, like I told you, Steve, this is the closest anybody's gotten to where he's buried. If he's not buried exactly under that stone, fine. But what you have done is you have narrowed the spectrum of where to look.
Yeah. I'm wondering if I'm going to see anything about this in memoirs when he does an update, So, like you had with the Beatles music, I wonder if anything will be put in there about the standing stone.
When I did the video on the Beatles music, whether they wrote all their own music or not, what Tom told me was that as truth comes out outside of Billy, in other words, truth is discovered and then it is communicated out into the public domain, this allows Billy to be able to disclose more. This is how it was explained to me. I don't know why that is. Maybe the contract is written in a way, or maybe the green light that he has received to disclose says that if truth comes out, then you can expand on it. You could talk about it. You can allude to it.
Right.
All right. So it's possible now. It's very, very possible that if Memoirs gets updated again, which I think it probably will at some point, that this will be brought in. It's very possible. Let's move to slide number 28 now. And we know that in conspiracy research that The Simpsons drop a lot of clues. And here, Steve, you picked up on this one here. So tell us a little bit about what caught your eye here.
It's interesting to watch that whole cartoon. You can still find it on YouTube. Going back to the whole thing with the tulip plantings that I believe are up there. Seeing that spade, that's an individual spade for planting bulbs. So it's very odd that he has that in his hand. It's not like a mason's tool, like people could interpret it that way. But to me, it's a bulb planting apparatus shovel, So, and the other one is for planting a bigger bed. But that particular type of shovel is for planting one bulb at a time. So it's a very unique shovel. It's definitely for planting bulbs. And I thought it was odd that it's in there,
No, it is very strange that it's in there. I would agree. And then you have a screen capture of the video of where Billy was planting those bulbs. And I'll rerun that video again so people can see. Okay, so I'll insert that into the presentation. All right, so on slide 29, Steve, tell me about this. I put this together, and I was assuming that I know where you were going with this, but why don't you just tell me what your thoughts were?
Yeah, this is really more of a Ralph thing. Maybe I should let him speak.
Okay, so on the last presentation, I know you guys were speaking about this John Lennon photograph, and we were trying to figure out possibly there was a message down below. So I was like focusing on this picture over and over. Then I looked at that photograph, and I'm like, it's like a mirror image of this photograph. And basically what I did, I just inserted the dog, Martha and Paul, Billy, in the other picture. And it's, instead of having like, we thought possibly that's a stone, the standing stone behind the left shoulder. It looks like John put a sun behind it. I don't know what the dates are exactly, if this is after this photograph was taken, but I do believe John drew this, and showing the clues again on the head. It's just straightforward. And also, I know like we did a mirror image on the bottom of the feet of the drawing, and it came to us. I don't know. I believe it looked like a skull on the feet of the drawing.
Okay, I have that, and I'll insert that in, Ralph.
But it's just very, like with John's drawings and even like with Bill's paintings, they're not, I'm not going to say they're the top quality, but there's a lot of little clues in there.
There's a lot of clues, and that's the thing with him. Everything he does has symbolism in it.
Mm-hmm.
Everything he does. And a lot of people have a hard time with that. Everything he does, Mike, everything he puts out as far as records and stuff like that and album covers and so on, when he does interviews, he masterfully speaks. He puts a lot of stuff out there. And it just takes looking at it and beginning to understand the symbolism. You can start to piece it together. So with this, I can see, where you've gone with this, and I think you're probably right. So he was doing an iteration or version of John Lennon's drawing. That's what I got out of it.
Yeah.
Ralph, we're going to stay with you because this next slide steps us through the your morph of the Beatles' Yellow Submarine album, and then to Linda's photograph of the Standing Stone. So, folks, just for point of reference, the bottom right is the Yellow Submarine album, as you know. First of all, maybe you could do this. Explain how you do these morphs, because they're fascinating. How do you do them?
It's funny because it's like, I'm just using my phone. I'm not even using my computer. I have a better graphics, I have a better program on my computer, but I've just been using my phone. I just take screenshots of, I have one program where I do a layer. It's called Layers, I believe. And I just go ahead and I put the photographs on top of each other, and I lower the opacity on the picture that's going to morph into it, and just do screenshots. And then I put it through a GIF or GIF, however you want to say it, program, and it just puts it together. And it takes maybe like not even 5 minutes.
Okay. All right. And so you have picture number one there is, you took out the rest of the Beatles, and we just have Paul's, his legs, right?
Yes.
And number two, we're starting to bring in Linda's picture, and 3, more of Linda's photograph. 4, we're really starting to see Linda's photograph, and then it's almost a direct map to Paul's pants on the Yellow Submarine album.
Yes, I believe so. And even the hand on the there's the hand pointing to the Beatles, and the album cover is, I mean, it's a little lower, but it kind of reminds me of the horse. You can see a little bit of the horse in the morph, and it almost looks like the horse's head.
Yep. Okay. Very good. All right. So I think I have the morph of this as well, and I'll insert that into the video.
Okay.
So people can see it in real time versus looking at the stills. All right. Slide 31, we have some occult hand signs and the letter P on the sub, and of course the hand signs that they're doing. We've got Billy doing the 666 sign, and we've got John holding up the sign of Baphomet, and again the P is on the sub. And so, Steve, I guess what you're saying here is that the P on the submarine represents Paul McCartney.
Yeah, and something else came to me later. Yeah, the P definitely represents Paul, and what I thought was interesting about this, when you think of, there's usually 4 pallbearers carrying a casket. And you think Paul, the word Paul, and then pallbearers, and they're holding up this submarine casket, as if they're holding it up and they're going to carry it to a grave. So those kind of things come to me pretty quickly. I look at it and I feel that's real symbolism for that too. I could be wrong again, like I always say, but I feel like they're holding it up, and at least the back 2 are, George and Ringo are.
Yeah.
And P being represented as the body in there.
Well, the other thing that I noticed was this is a 45 RPM sleeve, so we have Yellow Submarine and Eleanor Rigby,
yeah,
which is another Paul is Dead song.
Yeah, no doubt.
Okay. So let's move to the next slide. And what I can do here, guys, is I can read this. And I actually found this on Wikipedia, and I found this to be very interesting. So when we talk about the Beatles and what the social engineering and the cultural changes were all about, one of the primary results that they wanted out of the Beatles and Beatlemania was to dislodge Christianity. So in the memoirs of Billy Shears, we are told that the Illuminati declared war on Christianity back in 1962, and of course, 1962 is the official start of the Beatles. So I'm going to read this. This comes from Wikipedia. According to the band's press officer, Derek Taylor, all four Beatles had abandoned their religious upbringings by 1964. In an interview for the Saturday Evening Post in August of that year, he stated that the Beatles were completely Antichrist. I mean, I am Antichrist as well, but they're so Antichrist, they shock me, which isn't an easy thing. In February 1965, the band gave an interview to Playboy magazine, in which they defended themselves against claims that they were anti-religious, while at the same time emphatically declaring themselves to be agnostic. McCartney, we probably seem anti-religious because of the fact that none of us believe in God. Lennon, if you say you don't believe in God, everybody assumes you're anti-religious, and you probably think that's what we mean by that. We're not quite sure what we are, but I know that we're more agnostic than atheistic. Playboy, are you speaking for the group or just for yourself? Lennon, for the group. Harrison, John's our official religious spokesman. McCartney, we all feel roughly the same. We're all agnostics. Lennon, most people are anyway. McCartney, in America, they're fanatical about God. I know somebody over there who said he was an atheist. The papers nearly refused to print it because it was such shocking news that somebody could actually be an atheist. Yeah, and admit it. Star. He speaks for all of us. So this is very interesting to me, guys, because this goes right along with what we're told in memoirs. And we can see here that this is a process of dislodging a religion, Christianity, that is very embedded in American culture. And we can see that the war that they spoke about, that the Illuminati began in 1962, it certainly appears that the Beatles were reading that script. Any questions from you guys? Anybody have anything else they wanted to add?
Yeah, if I could, just quickly. It's interesting. When the first video came out, I started reading some of the comments, and there was comments recently that somebody posted there. It almost said something to the effect that after reading memoirs, this one lady, I don't have her name, but she felt like she had to have her book anointed, by a priest type of thing. So, because she believes there's magic attachments to the book. And I know I'm getting off on a tangent here, but I almost feel a bit obsessed with this now too, after reading memoirs. And you wonder how much magic was put into that book even, because I haven't been able to put anything down about this. It's constantly in my mind every day. By, going off on a tangent, but I thought it was interesting what she said on that and the whole magic thing. It definitely could have something attached to it, non-Christian like, So, it's a little bit spooky, I thought. I'm a Christian myself. I'm not really into anything devil-like, so this whole thing is a little bit dark to me. Just saying what I think.
No, Steve, I have received emails and comments saying the same thing, that they started reading the book and they had to actually stop reading it and put it down because they felt so uncomfortable with it. And I've also heard comments that, they believe that the book does have occult magic built into it, embedded into it. And I'm going to say that's probably so.
Right.
This is an area of research that is difficult to step out of once you get into it.
Yeah.
Because it puts you in a position where you constantly think that there's more to find, and there is more to find.
Yeah.
Now, I can tell you that it took me a while to step back from it, and I have stepped back from it. I'm doing this presentation, and I've got maybe another 3 or so that I'm going to put out to wrap things up. But I will say this, it is dark.
Yep.
And it is important that you don't spend too much time with your head in this rabbit hole. The way I've approached this is I've gotten to the point with this where I feel like I understand it, I've got it, and now it's time to move on and to go tackle other things, other areas of research, because this particular topic can become all-consuming. And there are pieces of this which are not healthy from, I think, from a spiritual perspective and maybe even from a mental and emotional perspective. It really depends upon the person, how strong the person is mentally to be able to look at this conspiracy and compartmentalize it. That's what I've done. I've compartmentalized it. I try not to spend too much time just swimming in it, because if you do, it will bring you down because there is darkness to it.
No doubt.
All right, so I'll get off my soapbox. And you sent this one over, Steve, and it's all in the mind, you know. And, of course, this goes along with, it maps in very nicely with the Aquarian conspiracy. It's all about the age of Aquarius, the rise of the Phoenix, and the Phoenix is Lucifer. It's the rise of Lucifer. All of this stuff is put out there. Many people have no idea what it means. If we think about it's all in the mind, you know, and we think about the New Age movement, we think about the Esalen Institute, which comes in under Tavistock, it is all about the mind. Okay, so we'll move to the next slide now, and slide number 34, we have Sgt. Pepper alternative album covers, and there's more symbolism. And I don't know, Steve, or anybody else wanted to talk a little bit about this. Where are we going with this?
First of all, I didn't know there was ever alternative covers to Sgt. Pepper. But, you know, Google's a really good thing because you can find a lot of things out there. And I saw like these, I think there's like 3 or 4 different cover options. And I can't use the person's name again, but this man was saying that there's a 5th Beatle kind of embedded where the wax figures are of the younger Beatles there. It shows like a shadowy image, which is probably the wax Beatle head, but even when nobody's there, there's still even one behind Paul McCartney's head. Behind his head where you could see, I'm trying to remember the name of the actor's name with the hat on there.
Marlon Brando.
Yeah, Marlon Brando. You know, if you look down below him to the right a little bit, you can see kind of a little bit of a shadowing even behind the wax figure's head. The feeling is, I guess, is that, you know, Bill is the 5th Beatle and there's now 5 instead of 4.
If we look at the image on the right, we have Billy standing to the left of the drum. Behind him is the wax of biological Paul McCartney. You could see the top of his head.
Right, which is kind of that shadowing again.
Shadowing, and it's also, I think, symbolizing that they are one and the same. In other words, Billy is now Paul.
Yep, took his place.
Took his place.
Yeah.
Yep.
And, you know, in the other one, Paul's kneeling. I thought that was interesting because, you know, at least when I go to a Christian burial, you kneel down on your knees at like the casket. And I thought it was strange. It's only Paul kneeling down there. I mean, Bill, kneeling down by where he'd be buried. So in other words, you know, he's kneeling down and taking his place, kind of, you know, paying respects to him, sort of.
The other thing I've noticed with these alternate album covers, these from the photo shoot, is that Billy looks less like Paul McCartney in these alternate shots.
And I think you're right.
Right? So if you look at the picture on the right and even the picture on the left, it's off.
Yeah.
And so I think with the final album cover, what they did was, number one, they decided, okay, this is the picture we want to go with. And 2, they did some work. However they were able to do it back in 1967, maybe to airbrush or to make some adjustments to the album cover to make Billy look more like Paul. But in the alternate covers, it is off. He doesn't look like he does on the album cover that finally was released.
Yeah.
All right, so let's move to slide number 36. And this is something you sent over. I found this to be kind of interesting, that there was some mirroring that was done. Now, who did this? Was it Ralph? Did you do this, or?
That was already out there. I just thought it was kind of interesting on the cover. Somebody else had done that. I don't know who to give credit to on that. Almost like the walrus is biting off half the child there. And there's also the symbolism of 3 legs there, sort of, too. And, of course, the walrus was Paul type of thing. You know, that's all tying into it.
There's a lot of mirroring that you can do on the Sgt. Pepper album cover.
Yeah.
And you'll get these types of things. I mean, the main one, of course, that everybody knows about is the mirror going horizontal across the drum. And that's how we get the 9/11 date and he died. And I'll slip that into the presentation so folks can take a look. Okay, so let's move to slide 37, and we have more Aleister Crowley symbolism. And so, folks, what we've done here is we have the Sgt. Pepper album cover on the left, obviously, and then we have this middle picture, which is a phallic symbol, and then the smaller picture to the right is from the Crowley self-portrait. So, Steve, the middle picture where we have the phallic symbol made of the flowers, this comes from the Sgt. Pepper album cover, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so what I did was I laid in a picture of Aleister Crowley's signature, and that actually comes from Wikipedia. And we can see that when Crowley signed his name, the A in Aleister, he wrote it as a phallic symbol.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing is his signature, the A, maps to the middle picture, which is a mirror of a portion of the album cover, and it looks very much like the middle picture, like his signature on his self-portrait, which is to the right. So the point being, folks, like, okay, Mike, what's the point? The point is we have more Aleister Crowley symbolism on the Sgt. Pepper album cover, not just a cutout of him in the upper left-hand corner of the album. You can see the arrow pointing down, the yellow arrow. But we have other symbolism embedded in the Pepper album cover that is tied to Aleister Crowley. It really does strengthen the argument that Crowley was very much tied into the Beatles, or I should probably say the Beatles were very much tied into Aleister Crowley. All right, so slide number 38. First, we should say that in Memoirs, Billy tells us that both bands, the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, were a creation of Tavistock. Give me your thoughts about this slide.
Yeah, on Magical Mystery Tour, it kind of shows a cartoon of the Beatles, which I think you'll get to in one of the next slides. Mick Jagger's wearing the same kind of hat as John Lennon is. It's almost identical. It has like a moon, kind of magical type wizard hat. And then on the clothes, this is not new information, but, it's odd that the Rolling Stones have pictures of the Beatles during a Sgt. Pepper time on their clothes, and you did a blow-up of that.
Yeah.
To show they're both tied into Tavistock and both created, and especially the name of that Rolling Stones album, Satanic, Majesty's Request, a lot of satanic type things in all this,
It's really in your face, right?
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. And I should point out, folks, that if we look to the image on the right, we can see in the upper left, we can see Saturn worship, which goes back to Satanism. We'll go to the next slide, and this is the image you were talking about, Steve, from the Magical Mystery Tour booklet, and we have Mick Jagger to the left with the witch's hat with the moon on it, and I titled the chart "Wizards and Magic."
Correct, yeah. But the same kind of moon shape, I think, on it, yellow moon with a black hat.
Yeah.
And the other three Beatles have red hats. So I don't know if that makes John Lennon more powerful. He was the leader of the band, and I would say Mick Jagger was the leader of the Rolling Stones before Billy took over, at least. So.
Yeah. So again, folks, if you're looking at this, you've got to get past thinking that this is just coincidental.
Right.
They're dressing the Beatles up, even in cartoon form, in wizards' costumes, which is actually in the film itself. And you've got Jagger on the cover of the Stones album, their Satanic, Majesty's Request. This is planned stuff, right? These are clues, and this is symbolism that is put out there. It's hidden in plain sight. So everybody needs to start asking themselves, what is this stuff? Why is it out there? What are they telling us? And the smarter we get about it, the more we're going to understand about our reality. So this was a good one, Steve, putting the two bands together and showing the connections. Now, on slide number 40, this is a little creepy. So what about slide number 40 here?
When I was Googling, I found a Klaus Warman picture from the Revolver era, because he did the cover of Revolver, but this was an alternative cover. And it shows Bill, actually, I believe, because of the beard and everything, as Paul McCartney laying down dead, To me, it shows it that way, under George's beard there. I thought it was so much like Rosemary's Baby's cover and the Imagine cover. They're definitely all tied in together. And John Lennon living at the Dakota in New York City at the time. That's where Rosemary's Baby was filmed.
Right.
You know, in that building. So there's some ties to Satan's Child or something. You know, they're trying to say something. I don't know what you think, Mike, of all that. So similar, you know. So.
Well, again, Steve, it's not coincidence that we have Lennon on the Imagine album. We have Klaus Vormann making the alternate Revolver album cover,
right,
depicting the back of the album cover of Imagine.
Yep.
Right, and these are years apart, and then looking identical to the movie poster for Rosemary's Baby.
Yep.
Okay, so I guess people can say, oh, it's all coincidence, but it's not all coincidence, and it's all tied in, and it is tied into Satanism.
Yeah.
That's my take on it, okay? This is not coincidence. This was planned. This is specific symbolism hidden in plain sight. All right, so we've gotten through some more occulted Beatles and symbolism, and we'll let the audience decide for themselves, or if they want to do some of their own research and dig deeper, well, I'll leave that to the audience. But we're going to shift now to something that Ralph's been very involved in, and we're going to talk about Vivian Stanshall. I believe more and more people now are really starting to see that Billy was Vivian Stanshall, who played in the Bonzos. And I'm on slide number 41 now, guys. So just to give a little background, there were two Vivian Stanshalls. There was the version of Stanshall that played with the Bonzo Dog Band with Neil Innes. That was Billy, who played that version of Vivian Stanshall. And there was another Vivian Stanshall that was on Billy's payroll that didn't play in the Bonzos, but he did his own music because he was a musician as well, and he also was in films. And that version of Stanshall that I refer to as Street Viv, his first name, if we take a look at Wikipedia, is Victor. So we shall refer to him as Victor. But we're going to focus on the Stanshall who played in the Bonzos. And this was a comparison that was sent to me. I did not put this together. I believe I received this in an email or a PM, and somebody said, hey, Mike, take a look. And so we have Stanshall, or Billy, playing Stanshall on the left with his red hair. And then we've got Billy playing McCartney. This was his mullet era. And then we have a split, a comparison between Stanshall and Billy on the far right. So I don't know, guys, when I saw this, I thought it was one of the best proofs that Billy played Stanshall, and Stanshall is Billy. What are your thoughts? Let me start with Ralph. What did you think when you saw this one?
I was actually annoyed that I didn't find these pictures myself. Because it's an obsession, because when you first see Bill next to and Vivian, a lot of people don't see it, and it's really hard. And I think one of the easiest things at first is if you start focusing up on his upper brow compared to Paul's, then you can kind of see it from there, and then you got to work down the eyes, and then you can see the guy's characters pretty close. This just proves everything right here. It's just great comparisons. It's really funny how you trick you. And I think it's also growing up. I'm born in 71, so the Beatles were already finished by then. So I always saw the two different Pauls as one, because that's how, your program, it's like a new car model. Like, this is the 1966 model. Here's a 68 model. And it's like the same. It's a Mustang. Once you see Vivian, it's so clear. It's so clear. Like, I cannot not see him anymore as two different characters.
One of the telltale signs that I point out to folks is that Billy has a somewhat lazy left eye. It kind of wanders a little bit. And there are photos and images where you can see that the eye does that. So, and we can see it in this particular picture. So on the left, we have Billy playing Stanshall. And take a look at his left eye, which is on our right, and you can see it kind of drifts a little bit to the left.
Yeah.
Right? And then look at the middle picture, and we can see the same thing, where that eye is kind of drifting a little bit to the left, or Billy's left, would be our right. So that's one of the telltale signs. And it's very interesting with this one. The nose at this point still looks very similar, which means that the rhinoplasty and the surgeries that Billy had to narrow the nose, especially the end of the nose with the flare of the nostrils, wasn't quite there yet at this point. And you made a very good point, Ralph. We would just take a look at McCartney over the years and say, oh, that's him. He just looks differently. And the reason why he looks differently was because if you think back, Billy was always changing up his appearance, which I believe was part of the plan to make it more difficult to be able to make the comparisons. But in any case, yeah, so I thought this was a great depiction. And so for all of those that still don't want to believe or embrace the fact that Billy played Vivian Stanshall of the Bonzos, here you go. And if you still don't see it, I don't know what to tell you. So we'll go to slide 42. And Ralph, this is your work here. So what did you do here?
Again, I just placed the two pictures on top of each other, lowered the opacity so you can, I lined up the faces. And the thing when lining up with Vivian and Bill's face is that it just lines up. Once I put the eyes on the eyes, that's it. The nose, the mouth, everything lines up perfectly. You can try to do it on other people. It doesn't work. I try to do it with Paul, and it doesn't work. It just always fits in. And that's what's the fun, like even almost just like that stone on the cover with Linda's picture. It's just lined up. Yeah. Everything's with Vivian. You can't deny it. You really can't. But when you see him perform, it's a completely different character, which is very impressive.
It is very impressive. That's the thing. Billy is a performer. He's an entertainer, and he pages in and out of multiple characters. It's really very interesting. But one thing you said, which was very key, is that when you do the overlays, the eyes, the nose, the mouth, the chin, they all map. Which means what, Ralph? It means we're dealing with the same face, right?
Yeah, definitely. There's no question about it.
Okay, so slide 43, this one says the eyes say it all, and we have an image of Billy on the left, and then we have Vivian on the right. The image of him on the right is another run at Christianity. We could see that he has the tape on his feet and his hands from being crucified. So I guess what we'll do is we will move to the next slide, 44. And so, Ralph, what you did here was, again, you took Billy's face from the prior chart, and then you started to overlay it with Vivian Stanshall, and again, we have a match.
Yeah, it's just, it lines up perfectly. And it's kind of funny because at a certain point, it almost looks like Robin Williams.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so slide 45 is a more step-by-step depiction of that particular morph. And yeah, there you go. That's the same guy.
Yeah. And like I said, when you watch him perform, and now I'm like a big fan of the Doodah Band. They're a very interesting band. It's almost like the mothers of invention on the East, in England.
Oh, they were very talented, and Neil Innes was very talented. And of course, Neil Innes was in the Doodah Band with Billy, but Neil Innes was also the brains behind the Ruddles.
Yes.
Okay, so if you don't know him from the Doodah Band, then or the Bonzos, you will know him from the Ruddles. He played the character Ron Nasty. He played the John Lennon character.
Yeah, definitely.
Right?
It's great. I know we were trying to watch the other day on Amazon. What was it? The Bee Gees Sgt. Pepper came on. Oh my God! My son and I, like my younger son, he just turned 11, and he's been into this, and it's kind of nice to see it with fresh eyes from a child because he can definitely see the two different characters. He's like, they don't even look alike. Yeah. So he does it. He's not brought up with them, but watching that film, oh wow. There was no clues.
George Martin was very, very involved in that film, and also Bernard Purdie drummed on many of those tracks. So,
oh yeah,
yeah, very interesting, right? So Bernard comes back to drum on Beatles songs. All right, so we have possibly another graveyard at Hyde Park, and I don't know, John or Steve, who would like to comment on this to set it up?
There was lots of wee areas like that about. There was loads of the same type of stone as the standing stone was made from. So I don't know whether they were graveyards as such or what they are. They've maybe been quarried or something, I don't know. But they were similar types of stones. They were the identical type.
Okay, but they were smaller.
Oh, aye, yeah, well, a lot smaller.
All right, and then on slide 47, daffodils at Hyde Park, and Steve had mentioned that he believes in the video clip from many years ago where Billy and Linda are planting that they were most likely planting daffodils. Do I have that right, Steve?
Actually, I thought it was tulips.
Tulips, okay.
Another theory here is John noticed some yellow flowers there with his wife while he was up there. You know, it could be in that same area. I don't know if that was near the burn. I have to verify that with John again. If it's down near that stream below to the left of the standing stone, was it, John?
The standing stone is at the front of the house, and those yellow flowers were at the rear of the house, like the back garden. See, over at the rear, that's where I reckon the burn was running. So I would imagine that's where that planting was taking place. I don't think it was near the standing stone. I think it was the other end of the farm.
So while this is speculation, you know, mums bloom around this time of year. It could be mums, daffodils, but daffodils bloom much earlier, you know, same time as tulips, really. So I doubt they're daffodils. But without him getting closer, you can't really see it. It's very blurry because I blew up the picture quite a bit that I sent you. You can see yellow there. It could even be that the caretaker there has been asked to put flowers maybe in some kind of urn, to put something there just as remembrance to him, you know, or, you know, it's like a planted pot of mums, yellow mums or whatever, just to mark the place. You know, again, if he's in a chamber type of thing, maybe that's where he is, if it's near that berm where they were jumping on.
Yeah.
Maybe they have flowers continuously up there. You know, that would be my thought. He did really feel like they were flowers.
Okay, so that's interesting, and we'll leave this slide there, and folks can chew on it a bit and come to their own conclusions. Let's move to slide 48 now. I think, Steve, this is something you wanted to talk about. You mentioned that you have a theory, or at least some thoughts, where John Lennon might be buried.
Yeah. You know, they said that he was cremated, but it did show a body also of him, you know, that I believe Ralph has a picture of that. It's a possibility that John's body might have been transferred over to Strawberry Fields in Beaconsfield Road, which is over in England, in Liverpool. But I was tipped off about Beaconsfield Road. I won't say by who, but, you know, something big is supposed to happen there eventually. So the only thing I could figure, I don't think it has to do with Paul. I think it has to do with John Lennon, or possibly both of them. Now, I'm doing a lot of conjecture here, but it was an orphanage that was either burned down or torn down by, you know, with age. It was supposed to be the playground of John Lennon. So it was an important area for him to play in because he lived close by to there. And John actually just recently went to these areas. I was having him look for rhododendrons, and he could not find one rhododendron there. So, and it says something in memoirs about if you want to find Paul or something, look under the rhododendrons, or, you know, which kind of throws you off on the standing stone too. I was almost wondering if I was being thrown off the path by this tidbit of information about Beaconsfield Road. I don't know for sure.
Okay. And the other thing we have to, you know, keep in mind is that memoirs does have threads of fiction in it in order to keep the fictional aspect of the book in place so that Billy does not breach his confidentiality agreements that he signed, right? So the rhododendrons could be a ruse. And you said, Steve, that something you heard or somebody told you that something big would happen at Beaconsfield Road. What do you mean by that? Without getting into revealing sources, what does that mean?
I was just told, like, even after Billy passes, something's going to come up about Beaconsfield Road.
Okay.
So that intrigued me, and all three of us have been trying to hunt and find clues or anything about this. The only thing really Ralph saw was that there's 4 different designs on that gate, and that's a replaced gate. I guess somebody stole it. So, and the 4 Beatles or something, it might have something to do with that gate, that being that way. Oh, by the way, before, you know, about this Beaconsfield Road, when John just took his trip, I think it was last weekend, and there was a red door also on McCartney's door. So, you know, at his childhood home.
Okay.
Bit odd, same color paint too. So, just wanted to say that might be another slight clue.
Yeah.
You know, because John Lennon's door wasn't that color, right? I believe.
No, but maybe they had paint left over from when they did Billy's Farm.
Could be. I also have this theory, and somebody else does too, that it's possible that Paul McCartney and John Lennon were orphans themselves. And, it's funny because, the parents died early. If you look at a lot of pictures of Paul McCartney's father that Bill was with in a lot of the pictures, he looks like three different people.
Yeah.
So there could have been other actors. I mean, if Bill's playing an actor part, maybe the family was actors. It's a possibility. Two orphans and no history of them, and they could just start fresh. Mind control. That was just a, conjecture on my part again.
No, it's okay, because I had said that, I've gone on record to say that I have a theory that the Beatles were in a mind control program from early on.
Yeah.
I've said this, and there's really no way to prove it, but there are clues. As an example, I think I mentioned this on the previous show, or certainly on other shows that I've done. We have images of biological Paul McCartney and George Harrison with bird cages over their heads. Bird cages are symbolic of Illuminati mind control. It's not just that they decide to put bird cages on their heads and then be photographed at a photo shoot. So again, symbolism is being communicated out,
yeah,
whether it be to us or to the inner circle. So I wouldn't discount the theory that John and Paul specifically, maybe George, maybe Ringo, who knows, but we'll focus on Paul and John, were orphans and possibly subject to a mind control program.
Right.
Because I have said, that the official narrative that we're given was written by the very same people that gave us the PSYOP, that created the Beatles and then created an entire backdrop, an entire fictional story about how it happened.
Right.
4 middle-class Scousers from Liverpool get discovered by a small record shop owner who then goes about trying to sell a demo tape. The 4 lads wind up with EMI under the tutelage of George Martin, achieve superstardom. I mean, that whole story is a Cinderella story that is complete fiction, and it's myth.
Right.
In fact, Lennon has told us so many times in a number of interviews that the Beatles were a myth. He calls it the Beatles myth, the McCartney myth, the Dylan myth. So anyway, so very interesting. We'll have to see, what happens, if anything happens with this. If you guys find anything, just let me know and we can get together again and talk about it. So that brings us to the very last slide. And Steve, I know you have some final thoughts, and then we can go to Ralph and to John to see how they want to wrap up. But what are your thoughts, Steve?
Yeah, and that final slide, I think John and Gillian, if I'm pronouncing it right, did that map, because I just wanted to. It's kind of a little bit dark, but it shows what in relation to where everything is on that farm, at High Park Farm. John was nice enough to put that together with his wife. I really appreciate these other 3 people that helped me with this, because Ralph is extremely talented with the visual end of things, and John having the courage to go up there and interview people took a lot, I think, and he had a 3-hour drive to get there. So he's really dedicated to trying to help the cause here, sort of, and I'm really happy that they were part of this and were able to be on the video. My hope in this whole thing, I think I wrote to you a little bit, that eventually there's going to be a disclosure of this burial site, if it is the burial site. I'd really hope it comes from Billy before he passes, or in a will or something, that they'll eventually say where he is. And the reason for that, like Elvis's grave at Graceland, fans can go visit it, other family members could go visit it. I just think it would be a great place to eventually have as a park. And whether that happens or not, if it doesn't, fine. But he'll do it in his time, I believe. He'll reveal what he wants to reveal. Okay,
yeah, we'll have to wait and see where he goes with it. But yeah, no, great work. John, any thoughts that you have?
No, not really. Hey, just thanks for letting me be part of this. It's been great fun.
Oh, you're very welcome. You're the main man. You went to the farm.
Yeah, that was a great day. It was a nice day. It was an experience.
Yeah, excellent. Very good. Ralph, what are your thoughts?
First of all, I want to thank you for this platform. This has filled so much of my time now. And it's just kind of a no BS way of looking at this. And it's basically all facts and evidence that you've actually kind of taught us how to follow this path. So very grateful for John and Gillian for going out there and taking those pictures. It was like Christmas waiting for them to post those pictures to us. And even though I know everything we know about the Beatles, I really do enjoy the music. My family loves the music. We saw Paul last year in concert. It became like a family thing, not so much with my wife, but with my boys. They love finding clues when we're listening to music, to the Beatles. It's good music. And I do love this, and I'm now loving Stanshall, his music, the Doodah band, and I'm just very, very happy that I came across Steven and John and Vivian and like the whole group that we have going on there. It's really, really good group of people that just keep bringing us more and more information and different ways of looking at this, different perspectives, which we all need.
Well, you guys have taken this to a whole nother level. Before, there was just a lot of guesswork about biological Paul and where he's buried and all that stuff. And, here you guys have brought together a very, very solid theory. And, time will tell to see whether you've got this thing nailed. But again, as I've mentioned to Steve many times before, you have gotten closer to the mark than anybody else that I know of. And you've done it by presenting evidence. It's circumstantial evidence. Fine. Everything with this theory, everything with just about any conspiracy is circumstantial evidence, right? Because if we found direct evidence, it would be case closed. So it's a matter of stitching together all of the circumstantial evidence to present the picture. You guys have done a great job. What we'll do is we'll get this out, and I know folks are going to love it. The first presentation was well received, very well received. And I think between my two channels, it has like 15 or 16,000 views, which is quite good considering the topic. The McCartney conspiracy and the Beatles conspiracy is still very niche. To us, it's very important. It's very front and center. But to many other people, especially people in the conspiracy research business and the alternative research business, they don't pay a lot of attention to it. So considering, our little small pie of the action, it's done very, very well. So I expect this will do just as well, if not better, than the first presentation. Well, gentlemen, that's it for today. I want to thank you very much. I'm going to try to have the presentation out as soon as I can. And if you have any questions, please feel free to email me.